minutes. Just to speak about the process, we are inviting members of the community who have signed up to speak for 3 minutes on the subject. We ask them just to introduce themselves with their name and go from there. Mr. Hahn, Assistant Superintendent Hahn, after 2 minutes, will inform the person that they have a minute left. Obviously, this is a matter that has risen, that has been an issue in our community for many years and a point of debate for many, many years, but one that has risen to a point of community concern that I believe demanded the attention of this body. So the purpose of this evening is solely to take community comments. We ask that people be respectful of one another and try as much as they can be positive in their comments. The school committee will not be speaking at the end of this meeting. This meeting is solely to hear from the 74 humans who have signed up to speak this evening. The school committee will speak at a Zoom meeting on Thursday, the 18th of this month, and deliberate and discuss all of the many, many comments we have received over the past week and a half. And so with that, being respectful of people's time and knowing that the large number of people who have signed up to speak, I will turn it over to Dr. Goff to begin inviting members of the public to speak and give testimony, and I will just thank each one at the end. Just we'll begin to move through this process. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So what I'll be doing is moving the attendees and making you a panelist one at a time. Just as Mr. Buckley reminded everybody, it's a three-minute limit, at which at the end of 3 minutes, then we will end your session. And then what you will do is you will not go back into the waiting room. You will actually exit the meeting. So then you will be able to go on per your email that was sent to you, the YouTube link or the cable television channel. When I do promote you to get you to panelist mode, please make sure that you state your name, turn on your camera, and then we'll unmute you to speak, and that's when your time will begin. So thank you. So first up, we have Rachel Bagley. So Rachel, if you'll turn your camera on.
That's you. That's you.
Yeah, I know. I'm just going to give it a second. There she is. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
Okay, your time can begin.
Hi, my name is Rachel Bagley. I just wanted to start by addressing the members of the school committee. I graduated in 2018 and I'm one of the co-founders of the petition to change the name. While my high school experience was a good one, that was a privilege afforded to me by the color of my skin. Many cannot say the same. I am not here today to give you a history lesson, as you are all well aware of the history behind the name and the name's origins, but we cannot continue to pretend that the name's meanings are simply history. I am here today to tell you to listen to Black voices. It is not for white people to dictate if a group can be offended by a name. This is a classic intent versus impact. Though the intentions of many people in this town may not be racist by supporting this name, the continued shutting down of Black voices in this conversation is frankly disgusting. There is no way, not a single way, that we can rebrand the name. You cannot rebrand racism, pain, disrespect, and isolation. Myself and Lindsay started the petition to amplify voices that have been speaking out on this issue since the name was first adopted. It's been going on for years, this debate's been going on for years, and we started this petition to be able to have those voices be heard. We are not the only voices that have been speaking on this, and we want to emphasize that we don't see this as an issue about us. The backlash we have received from this petition is likely the reason many have stayed silent in the first place. We are not personally hurt by it nor discouraged, but it's extraordinarily disappointing that some are more committed to defending a name, one that does not make or break the successes of Walpole sports or Walpole as a town, over standing up for what is right. One student feeling isolated, hurt, or disrespected by the name should be more than enough to create change. Over 5,000 and counting, the number of signatures on the petition now indicate it's a necessity. Changing the name is a gesture that will show the community that Walpole is on the path to change.
1 minute.
And to create a more inclusive and diverse learning environment. This is only the beginning. The best time for this change was yesterday, the day before that, and years before that. But the second best time is now. That is why I ask you to create a more inclusive learning environment for all of Walpole students and community members and vote to change the name on Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Janet
Thank you.
Vanderlyn.
Okay, next up is Janet Vanderlinden. And Janet, you can turn your video camera on, please, and then we will unmute you.
Hello?
Yes, if you go in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see a little video camera you'll just unclick the red that's across from, there she is.
Janet Fasanello.
Oh, okay, we had the wrong Janet, sorry, Fasanel.
Okay.
You may go, the time begins.
I've been a resident of Walpole for 44 years. My kids and grandkids have attended the schools and been rebels. And I just have a short statement to make. We are a country founded and built by rebels. The untested army of the American rebels was able to defeat a British superpower during the American Revolution. These rebels were innovators of a unique form of democracy called the United States of America. The unfortunate linking of the name, some of our negative history will never negate the proud name of the American rebels. I stand proud to be a Walpole rebel and hope that the school committee sees fit to understand the importance of having a name that goes well beyond the negative part of our history. However, it is part of our history. Thank you for hearing.
Thank you, Mrs. Fasanello.
Thank you, Mrs. Fasanel.
Thank you.
Bridget, can I say one thing?
Sure.
Sorry about, apparently Jan Vanderlinden was on and somehow he missed it and then it became Janet Fasanello. So I don't,
That was just a mismark.
It was just a mismark.
Of a name.
All right.
We had. It'll come up.
but I just got texted by the Vanderlinden. So I don't know if he should
Okay.
get back in or,
Actually, I think they're in. It just was on it's just further down the list.
okay, sorry, thank you.
Where are we? I'm sorry.
Megan Schwartz.
All right. Next up is Megan Schwartz. Hey, Megan.
Hello?
Yes, you
Hi.
may start.
Good evening. My name is Megan Lee Schwartz. I'm a teacher here at Walpole, and I have been for the last 8 years. I'm a science teacher, so forgive me for a quick history lesson. In the mid-1960s, Walpole adopted the rebel name. Shortly thereafter, John Lee was football coach here at Walpole and nicknamed himself General Lee. As our football team improved, General Lee and his rebels gained more prominence, and the school and community embraced the mascot and moniker to the point where it was appropriate to display the Confederate flag and play Dixie at school events. Over the next 2 decades, the imagery was embraced. In 1994, 129 years after the Confederacy's loss, the school officially declared that the rebel flag will no longer be used. But over the next 20 years, Dixie and the Confederate imagery was displayed at school events. And even though the cross swords have been replaced by the W logo, we are still the rebels. If you were to Google Walpole Rebels right now, the first image you see is a Confederate flag. Specifically, it was the one built by a town resident that lived next to the football field and put it up so it could be seen when sitting behind the field. That has since come down, and we've tried everything we can to rebrand the image of the Walpole Rebel. The fact still remains that fairly or unfairly, the name Rebel has become tied to the images of the Confederacy, which represents an alliance with slavery, white supremacy, and racism. We are still seeing students who were born a decade after the fact, holding onto the Confederate imagery on cell phone cases, backgrounds, and bumper stickers. Our issues don't end strictly with Confederate imagery. In class, I shared a story about how I'm part Jewish, and in the days following, I found swastikas and Nazi flags drawn in my classroom. I came to find out there were several instances of swastikas in school that year. Some students said it was a joke about a regime that slaughtered a whole race of people. How can we say that is wrong, and yet here we are advertising flag ties to another flag, name, and imagery that does the same to the Black community? And now we're at a time in this country where we're having discussions about these images and symbols.
1 minute.
We see places like Richmond, the former capital of the Confederacy, a discussion surrounding the real generally and whether his statue should stay. The residents of Richmond do not want to look up and see depictions of men who wanted to keep them and their fellow citizens in chains leering over them. We want our students to walk through the door and question whether administration and fellow students feel the same. It should be clear that we no longer have any affiliation with any sort of Confederate name or imagery. We are a place for students to learn and grow, not question what their school represents. We don't want our students to ever have to explain what rebel means, but they do, because when you Google Walpole Rebels, there it is. And they have to explain, but it doesn't mean that. We want our students to be able to talk about diversity and inclusion and community, and we want our school's mascot to be able to represent those things. Maya Angelou said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." In the past, we did the best we could by rebranding. Now we must do better by changing the name.
Done.
Thank you.
Time.
Thank you.
Schwartz.
Next up is Katia Santiago Taylor. And then on deck is Michaela McSherry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay,
Can
you
hear
might not
you
be
and I
able to
can
see
see
me. Sorry, construction in the new house. So
That's okay. We can see you.
awesome. Alrighty, so my name is Katia Santiago Taylor. As a Latina woman living and raising 2 kids that attend Walpole Public Schools, I am asking you to take a stand against racism and change the mascot. I was very happy to read that Walpole Public Schools will not remain silent in the face of injustice in the superintendent's letter from June 2nd. By taking actions and removing the racist mascot and name, Walpole Public Schools will show the community that it will not remain silent in the face of injustice, and by not changing the name and the mascot, Walpole Public Schools will show the community that as long as you say the right thing, actions are not needed. This statement reminded me one of my most favorite quotes by Desmond Tutu. He said, if you're neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Some supporters of the rebel name say words only mean what you make them mean. So I asked them, what do you think actions mean to the people who experience systemic racism? How do you think Black people feel when the Confederate flag is raised and the Dixie chant is used? I understand attempts to rebrand the name have been made, and some people want to think that the association with the Confederate flag has gone away. The reality is that it hasn't. You do not get to rebrand history. It is time to acknowledge that the Walpole Public Schools and the community have not been successful at rebranding. If Walpole Public Schools was successful, they wouldn't have to remind students and parents that the flag is not welcome. The students themselves would not want to be associated with the name, the flag, and the history, because they will understand how painful it is to Black folks. For a system that believes that the social emotional needs of the students is crucial for their development, I often think and wonder, which students are you talking about? Why would the system want to rebrand a racist narrative so that children who are oppressed have to be part of it. Why not directly address their social and emotional needs?
1 minute.
Why not create an environment that welcomes them? As I sit here, I ask you to take a look at the screen and ask yourself, what do you see? What diversity do you see? Is it because people of color are not elected, or is it because the system has established an environment that is not welcoming to people of color? How has the Walpole Public School system attempted to rebrand the name culture to foster an inclusive environment? Some people will say rebel is being part of a family, but the reality is that this does not include the people who feel oppressed. So it is a family that only welcomes the ones that look and behave like them.
14 seconds.
Why people will say otherwise? We
10
welcome all.
seconds.
We do not discriminate, we do not oppress. Now is the time for you to listen and to take action. I heard you. We must do more to understand our own privilege and support those who are marginalized. By acknowledging that rebel name and mascots are part of a narrative that over the years have emotionally and physically harmed Black folks, you will do just that.
Thank you.
Own your privilege and support those who are marginalized.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next is Michaela McSherry. On deck, Ethan McDonough. Oh, got the wrong person. All right. Sorry, before that was Michelle Fahey, and then Michaela McSherry. So Michelle Fahey, you're on next. I'll just wait a couple more seconds and then I can always go back to the attendees room. Michelle, if you can hear me, you can take we want to see your video and then you can take yourself off of mute.
Mute. Have you got a picture?
Not yet. Bottom left-hand corner, there should be a little video camera and you'll click that. There's a red strike through. If you click that, we'll be able to see you. There you go.
Okay, can you see me now?
Yes. Okay, you may begin.
Okay.
Sorry, I hit the wrong one.
Go for it, Ms. Fahey.
Hi, Michelle Fahey here. Walpole Rebels is, in my opinion, just a team name. I put 4 kids and still have 2 kids in Walpole High School. And personally, I can guarantee you that when they put on that uniform, there's not one of them that thinks of racism, Confederacy, Civil War, or slavery. They think of Walpole pride, camaraderie, and winning the game that they're going out to play. The kids have been through an awful lot already this year, and I think this is putting undue stress on them. And again, my opinion, I hear everybody's opinion. I think it should be going to a referendum. I think it should be put to the town so that every single person has a vote. What a great teaching time to teach the town that we have a democracy with all the upsetness that's going on in society today. So just again, I think it should be on a referendum that everybody's voice is heard.
Thank you, Mrs. Fahey. Thank you, Mrs. Fahey.
I got Michaela.
Up next is Michaela McSherry.
And then Ethan McDonough.
And then up next will be Ethan McDonough.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you and we can see you.
Okay, awesome. Hi, my name is Michaela McSherry, and I grew up in Walpole and graduated from the high school in 2017. To give you some perspective on who I am and why my voice matters, I spent my 4 years there running track and cross country, choreographing and performing with Dance Co., and receiving what I truly consider to be one of the best educations a high school can offer. I also spent a decent chunk of my time outside of class advocating for changing the rebel name, and I received plenty of pushback from my classmates because of this. Frankly, what one might even consider to be harassment. Because of this, I spent a good chunk of time trying to figure out why my peers and community members were so attached to a name with such a truly hideous history. I don't want to waste my short 3 minutes explaining where the rebel name comes from, or how it is inextricably linked to the Confederacy. I trust that every school committee member understands this history, and I trust that we all on both sides of this debate understand the origins of the name, though we might disagree with its presence in the community today. But it is this current use of the name I want to dwell on. First of all, to respond to the many comments on the counter petition, I just want to say that I am not personally offended or insulted by the rebel name as a white member of this community, but I do find it to be a perverse representation of town pride. I also recognize that the word rebel with a lowercase r is not an offensive word, and it's actually one that I tend to align myself with. Within the town lines of Walpole, however, rebel with a capital R is a reminder of a history saturated with casual racism, of Confederate flags and football stands, of Dixie playing over loudspeakers. Rebel with a capital R is a symbol of a present saturated with casual racism, of a flag not being covered up by the high school for nearly 6 years after Mr. Finneran hung it, of a community often more concerned with its town history based in high school football than with its country's history of racism and white supremacy. Your town pride is not what I take issue with. I take issue with your inability to change one word to create a more inclusive and less anti-Black culture in this town. I'm not the sensitive one here. I'm not the one throwing a fit because I'm scared to lose connection to my childhood with the changing of one word.
1 minute.
Eliminating the rebel name is an act of inclusion, to make students of color able to feel that same sense of community that we all love so dearly. In the light of our current political situation in the US, as we move forward into what seems to be a dawning era of racial justice in a more egalitarian US, I encourage you as the school committee to align yourself and Walpole at large with the right side of history, and signal to your students of color that you care about and for them, and that they have just as much a place here as the kids of those who flew a racist flags those short few years ago. We can do better because we all deserve better. And I'd like to end by saying the changing of the rebel name should not be seen as an end to the work we as a community need to do. I hope to see the wonderful members of this committee and the rest of the community make a choice to protect and love their students of color today and into the future. We need a cultural shift in Walpole, and that lives hugely in our education system. So please seek out the voices of color and teach what anti-racism looks like, but start by rejecting the continuation of a racist past through the symbolism that lives in the word rebel.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela.
Ethan McDonough.
Thank you, Ms. McSherry.
Next up is Ethan McDonough. On deck, Christina Freiberger. Hi, Ethan. Hi, you may begin.
I'm Ethan McDonough, and I'm 17 years old, and I'm a resident senior at Walpole High School. First off, I'd like to acknowledge and respect the movement to change the rebel name. Yet, on the contrary, I believe the urge to change the rebel name is premature, abrupt, and unnecessary. Over the past few years at Walpole High School, we have made multiple attempts to disassociate the racial connotations through both the removal of the Confederate flag and the swords under the W in our logo. Alongside these changes, the Walpole community has also been able to create a new culture surrounding our beloved rebel mascot. To me, the rebel name is a symbol that connects all members of our community, regardless of race, gender, age, or any ideas. Everyone in our community, to me, is a rebel. I believe that the death of George Floyd has collectively changed the way we view our world today, which inevitably ignited the movement of mass change. Although I support the movement for equality, I believe that removing the rebel name is counterproductive as the town is ripping away our sense of unity. I'd like to thank everyone on the board for allowing everyone to speak and give their feedback during this very powerful session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you, Ethan.
Christina Freiberger.
All right, up next, her name. Christina Freiberger. And on deck, sorry, is Joe Burke. Christina, you can unmute and begin.
First off, thanks so much for taking the time to hear all of us out. To give a little background on myself, my name is Christina Freiberger, and I'm a 2012 alum of WHS, taking the stance of changing the rebel name. But first, I'd like to take a few minutes to express how much the rebel name used to mean to me. On multiple occasions in high school, I displayed my support for the mascot by shouting rebels chants into a megaphone at pep rallies, by staying after school to finalize editing for the rebellion, and by straight up painting the word rebels across my face for various sporting events. Yet, if you had asked me in high school what my opinion was on the rebels mascot, I would simply say, I don't know, because I literally was too afraid to even formulate an opinion. I didn't want any blame put on me. Upon graduating, I ignorantly adopted an out of sight, out of mind mentality and went on to pursue a degree at Boston College. As many of you know, BC has a large native Massachusetts population, so in meeting new friends and them learning where I was from, they often responded with a snide, Walpole rebels, those Confederates.
Yeah,
Like many citizens of Walpole, I tried to distance the Rebels Association from the Confederacy, arguing that it innocently meant fighters, but I was lying to myself and to them. The unfortunate truth is that there's not much distance between our rebel name and its link to the Confederacy. As you know, the Confederate flag was styled on uniforms until 1994, and our fans proudly sang Dixie at sporting events. While action was taken at that time to eradicate this apparent association, it remained in the mind of many residents. Hence, the Confederate flag was displayed years later over our turf. The flag served as a backdrop for the majority of my high school career before the town finally took action to put a van in front of it, and only on game days. To all the students who had to walk past that flag every day on their way to practice and felt unwelcome or offended by it, I would like to apologize on behalf of our town. We should have done more. We want to do more now for you. Right now is a trying time for all of us. A lot of people have lost educational resources, jobs, stability, and many of us have lost loved ones. Yet despite these hardships, Walpole has still displayed unity, running errands and making meals for our neighbors, donating to the fire and police departments, cheering on the seniors for a drive-by graduation. Walpole is a town that proves time and time again that we can come together. I believe that this time will be no different.
1 minute.
I'm taking a stand for the WHS students, past, present, and future, whose voices need to be amplified about the name change, as well as those too afraid to form an opinion like I once was. It's important that we realize Walpole pride does not lie on just one side of this argument, rather it fuels both sides. We all want what's best for our community, and devastates me that an offensive and divisive mascot prohibits some students at WHS from adopting this feeling of pride that all of us here tonight share. We need to know that we need to do more than just put a van in front of our town's guilty history. We need to remove what has shamefully laid behind it for many years. All it takes is Walpole pride, not rebel pride, to get through this transformation together. As a 2012 Walpole Most Rebel Pride recipient, I ask that you please change the Walpole High School mascot.
Thank you, Christina.
Joe Burke.
Up next is Joseph Burke, and on deck is Chris Cameron.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you may begin.
Hi, I'm Joe. I'm 23 years old and I've lived in Walpole all of my life. Walpole High School, class of 2015, and captain of the swim team. I currently work at the high school as an educational support professional. Recently, the President of the United States put out a statement condemning the movement to rename the U.S. military bases named after Confederate generals. He explained that such names, quote, have become part of a great American heritage and a history of winning, victory, and freedom. To suggest that the Confederacy, the people who fought against the very nation we live in today to preserve the right to own slaves and lost, represents any of these three principles is, by no stretch of the imagination, a falsehood. As a representative of the school, I'm here to call into question the motto we have adopted as an emblem of the model behavior we aim to see in students. PRIDE is an acronym that stands for positivity, respect, integrity, drive, and empathy. Why is it then that we cling so strongly to the word we say right before pride, rebel, which carries with it such a negative history of disrespect due to its lack of empathy or abject hatred towards our Black and brown neighbors? If we value integrity, why don't we own up to it by listening to the people who aren't being heard right now? It does not matter how many superficial meanings you ascribe to the Confederate flag and the rebel name yourself. Its fundamental meaning is the origin of the white supremacist fight to keep slaves as slaves. And that history is something that cannot be erased. You said in your school committee meeting on Thursday that, quote, one of our most important goals is to maintain a school culture that supports all students. Have we not failed at this promise, even if just a single student comes forward to express their discomfort? People on the other side may say that they feel uneasy with the bumps in the road, financial or otherwise, that comes along with such a massive rebranding. Unfortunately, this does not hold a candle to the violence and oppression that Black folks have to experience every single day of their lives. If we have any ounce of drive in us as a school system, we need to use it to usher in the necessary steps towards a brighter future and more inclusive future for all students, instead of choosing to do nothing and perpetuating the hate, bigotry, and injustice from which we claim to be distancing ourselves.
1 minute.
I'd like to say that the time is now, but the time was yesterday. It was last year. It was 4 years ago when the Confederate flag overlooking the football field was taken down. It was decades ago when, in the wake of the Civil Rights Movement, what we consider to be the largest shift towards African American rights in U.S. history, our town still waved this offensive flag proudly and prominently. If Black lives matter to us so much, we need to start demonstrating behavior that shows that they do. This begins with the removal of the rebel name. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Ms. Burke.
Up next is Chris Cameron. And on deck is Courtney Landy Cuniff.
Hi, my name is Chris Cameron. I was born and raised in Walpole and graduated from Walpole High in 2009. When I was a senior at Walpole High School, I was captain of the football, basketball, and track teams. This included winning a state championship in 2008 with the football team, which was one of the proudest and happiest moments of my life. In short, I was a proud rebel and avid defender of rebel pride and all it stood for. But that name that once filled me with so much pride now brings me shame and embarrassment. For all the reasons I stated above, I can empathize with the people that defend the rebels as Walpole's mascot. But it can no longer be ignored what the rebels, and by extension the Confederate flag, represents, which is slavery, segregation, hatred, violence, and racism. These are not values that represent this great town, and therefore these symbols are not worthy of representing Walpole. Anyone who says the rebels and the Confederate flag stand for something else either don't understand history or the fact that the impact is different than intent. The expressions heritage not hate and pride not prejudice ring hollow because the impact on people of color, and in particular African Americans, is clear and devastating. Some may object to my conflating the rebels and the Confederate flag because the Confederate flag was officially removed from association with the school in 1994. But the reality of the situation is that the Confederate flag is still very much present in the culture of the rebels and Walpole High School. When I played football in the late 2000s, the Confederate flag was a regular sight in the locker room. When I played in the Super Bowl in 2007 and 2008, the Confederate flag was flown in the stands of Gillette Stadium. The Confederate flag was also raised in the yard of a neighbor overlooking Turco Field for a number of years, looming over the school like a specter. And most recently, I read in the Boston Globe that school officials had to warn graduating seniors not to fly the Confederate flag in their graduation parade. The time for half measures is over. Removing the Confederate flag, rebranding the rebels, and covering the neighboring Confederate flag, these are half measures that simply are not enough. The only way to end our association with the Confederate flag once and for all is to retire the rebels.
1 minute.
The choice facing Walpole right now is to either be anti-racist and draw a clear break from our checkered past, or maintain the status quo and perpetuate systemic racism. This is the choice presented to Walpole at this moment, and we should be looking at this moment not with fear or sadness, but as an opportunity to step into a new and bright future, to start a new chapter in Walpole's storied history. We have a chance to signal to our town, our state, and the entire country that Walpole is an inclusive community and welcome to all. With that in mind, I implore you to make the right decision on Thursday and vote to remove the rebels as Walpole's mascot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron.
Thank you, Chris. Up next is Courtney Cuniff. And on deck is Darlie Desimont. Hi, Courtney, you may begin.
My name is Courtney Landy Cuniff, and while I myself am not originally from Walpole, my husband's family has been proud to call this town their home for generations. When I first became acquainted with this town and with the Walpole Rebels name, I would never have associated either the town or the school with the Confederacy in any way, least of all with the misguided beliefs held by the South during the American Civil War. The history of our nation is undoubtedly flawed, as are the histories of all nations of the world when closely examined. But what is important to note here is that our nation's flawed history has absolutely no bearing on what it means to be a Walpole rebel today. In fact, it was never intended as an association whatsoever. It is incredibly unrealistic to assume that we can continually and consistently control the perceptions of others, whatever our town name. All that we would accomplish by changing who we are is a demonstration of fragility and weakness. It may feel easier or simpler to completely bend to the whims and misinformed perceptions of others than it is to face them head on and stand up for what it really means to be a Walpole rebel. Taking the easy way out is not one of the values that we should be instilling in our students and student athletes. Avoiding conflict is not at all what it means to be a Walpole rebel. At I mentioned earlier that I am not originally from Walpole. I would like to take a brief moment to tell you where I do come from, which speaks to one of the reasons I so strongly support the Rebel name. I grew up in Kingston, New York, a city located in the heart of the historic Hudson Valley, which was once the original capital of New York State. Kingston was burned by the British in 1777 during the Revolutionary War, a time when being a rebel meant fighting for American independence from British rule, when I think all of us as American patriots would agree it was a very good time to be a rebel. I've watched as my own hometown has slowly stripped itself of its heritage in similar, seemingly small ways. But those seemingly small ways add up to disunity and a tragic lack of identity. When I go back to the town where I grew up, I find myself in a place that I no longer recognize, a place that makes me feel as though I no longer belong, a place that does not even know who it really is.
1 minute.
I do not want that happen to the town of Walpole. Language is a double-edged sword in that it is infinitely mutable. Just as the word rebel has been misappropriated in the past, it can be and has been righted and reimagined for today. Being a Walpole rebel means having the courage and determination to unapologetically be yourself, to not let anything or anyone stand in the way of your goals. Collectively, the Walpole rebels are a family comprised of passionate leaders, free thinkers who are devoted and proud and who stand up for what they believe in. By this definition, no matter where you may stand on the issue at hand, we are all truly Walpole rebels. My sincerest hope is that we all band together in solidarity in the true acknowledgement of what it means to be a Walpole rebel and preserve the real and courageous ideals of this beautiful town. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Up next is Darlie Desimont, and on deck, Jamie Ferguson. Hi, Darlie, you may begin.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, guys, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and why I believe the Rebel name needs to change. I grew up in Walpole my entire life. From Boyden to middle school, from Bird to Walpole High. For myself, I have never experienced racism to the point where I felt like, I can't believe this is happening to me. Like, this is terrible. I can't believe this. No, I haven't. But what I can tell you is that when you're inside the bubble of being in Walpole High, it's a lot different. It is a lot different to try and understand why a rebel name can mean something to you, but mean something completely different to others. When I was in Walpole High School, alongside Chris Cameron, we were a part of the state championship team, which was one of the funnest times of my life, being a part of that team. The problem that I have is not with people in Walpole. It's the name, because the name to me, it symbolizes that we've been selfish for years. Me personally, I learned that this name has been looking to be changed for years now. And almost every year there's a petition for the name to be changed. The only reason why I saw this petition in the first place was because of Rachel Bagley and Lindsay Sullivan, which I am so thankful that I saw this petition. Because to me, it made me think to myself. The perception of others can affect what Walpole looks like as a whole. I'm from Walpole High. I love Walpole. I've lived in Walpole my entire life. But when I played games in Walpole, and I shook people's hands after the game, they would look me in the eyes and ask me, Douglas, why are you part of this team?
1 minute.
Some people I would know, some people I would not know. They would ask me, why are you with this team? And I always questioned myself, why are they asking me that? Why are they being rude? And maybe I thought it was because we were winning. No, it's not the case. Because when you're inside the bubble of Walpole High, you need to understand that once you leave that bubble, the perception of others is that Walpole is a racist town, or Walpole is, they have the Confederate flag that people are so used to. And we know that there are a lot of people within Walpole that aren't racist. I think the people who are fighting for the name to be kept is if we are saying they're racist. That's not the case. What we're saying is perception is reality.
10 seconds.
When you leave Walpole, it affects people. The name affects people. And I feel like the name needs to change. And I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, darling.
Absolutely.
All right, up next is Jamie Ferguson, and on deck, Laura Cicchetti. Oh, okay. I don't know why Samantha just came on. All right, Samantha Rafferty just came on. So Samantha, why don't you just hold?
Jamie's there.
Jamie's there. So Jamie, you're going to speak. Samantha, you can keep your camera off, and we'll let Jamie, then Samantha, and then Laura.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jamie Ferguson, and I moved to Walpole when I was 1 year old. So for as long as I can remember, my entire childhood was rooted in this town. I attended public school here for 12 years, and I was fortunate enough to return to Walpole as an English teacher after graduating college last year. This opportunity allowed me to give back to the school community that gave me so much. I am so lucky to have had a positive experience growing up here, but as a white woman, I am privileged to be able to separate this positive experience from the history of our school mascot. For me, and for other white students, the rebel name and the Confederate flag are an uncomfortable parenthetical to an otherwise excellent education. But for Black students and students of color in Walpole, the very foundation of their education is built on this racist name. They do not have the privilege of making that distinction because you cannot have a conversation about the name rebels that exists separately from a conversation about the Confederacy. The comfort and safety of our Black students is far more important than the feeling of nostalgia for one's high school mascot. So as a town that prides itself on acceptance, how can we continue to subject our students to this intolerance? As a member of this community, I understand the love people have for their hometown and the pride they have in their accomplishments. I'm certainly proud of what I achieved here, and I wouldn't ask that we take that away from anyone. But what made me proud of my achievements wasn't the logo on the uniforms or the banners in the hallway. It was collaborating with classmates, forming relationships with teachers, and being a part of the community that made those achievements possible. Changing the name does not change the fact that you're proud of your school. If anything, it should make you proud that the town you grew up in is willing to take a stand against injustice. I can say without hesitation that I have so much more to learn about the world, not only as an educator, but also as an individual. I do not pretend to think that I, as a white 23-year-old, am able to speak to you now and give you a simple solution to a complex issue. But what I can tell you is that I think empathy and compassion can go a long way. As a teacher, I try to live by the idea that even helping one student feel better, to feel more educated, more confident, more understood, is a victory.
1 minute.
And I think many of you feel the same. Throughout my life, I've seen our town rally to support those in need, and I think it's a truly wonderful thing. Now we have an opportunity to extend that support to hundreds of people in our town and millions of people across the country. And I urge you to take that responsibility seriously and to listen to the voices of the Black community in this time. To be unaware of the weight of the term rebels as a student is understandable, but to willfully ignore this as an adult is inexcusable. We can never erase the years in which Walpole was tied to racism, but by changing the name from the rebels, we can make a powerful first step in moving forward from this history. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jamie. All right, next up, Samantha Rafferty, and on deck is Laura Cicchetti. Well, Samantha, you can unmute, turn on your video camera, and that can begin.
I'm not seeing an option for my camera. I'm trying to find it.
Okay. Usually at the bottom left, there'll be that says start video.
I just have a mute. I'm not sure.
She can just go, can't she?
I apologize.
See if you can hear it.
Let me see if I can do it on my end for you. No.
It says non-video participant, so why don't you just let her go?
Okay. Samantha, everything matches up with us, so go ahead, please.
Okay.
Your time begins now.
So my name is Samantha Rafferty. I'm a teacher at Walpole High School, and I volunteered to read excerpts from our letter to school committee on behalf of 60 members of the staff of the high school. We respectfully request that the Walpole School District permanently and officially retire the rebel name. According to documents dating back on the 1960s, there is no doubt that the Walpole Rebels name is closely associated with the Confederacy.
Based on documents by Confederate leaders, we know the Confederacy was established on the belief that white men were superior to black men. We also know that the establishment and defense of the rebel name in Walpole has always corresponded chronologically with resistance to civil rights legislation from the 1960s to today. In short, there's no plausible way to separate Walpole's rebel name from its negative historical associations. There is also no way to separate the rebel name from other Confederate iconography. While we have officially removed the Confederate flag from our logo, private citizens of Walpole continue to associate the rebel name with Confederate imagery through clothing, car adornments, lawn signs, etc. These private behaviors frequently spill into public events like football games and parades. While we know that retiring the rebel name will not alter the choices of private citizens, we believe it will send the message that our school does not tacitly or explicitly condone the use of Confederate imagery. For years, students and families of color have told Walpole publicly and privately that the rebel name is a contributing factor in an environment that leaves them marginalized and underserved. They have reminded us in a recent letter, our country at large is a genuinely traumatic, unsafe environment for young people of color. Our students have asked us directly how we hope to create a safe, supportive, and inclusive environment when we will not definitively sever our ties with the historical source of the very trauma they deal with every day. If we fail to take this step in adjusting our school culture to meet the needs of our students, we effectively tell them their voices do not matter. In addition to harming our students personally and communally, the rebel name stands to shortchange them academically and athletically. Many of us, the faculty, were introduced to Walpole through a Google search during a job hunt and inwardly debated whether or not to apply to a district bearing the rebel name and all its inevitable associations.
1 minute.
If the rebel name gave us pause, how many qualified applicants, particularly applicants of color, did it put off altogether? Are we actually turning away the next Massachusetts Teacher of the Year or next Super Bowl winning football coach? We understand and admire the town's commitment to tradition, and we want to support a tradition that serves all our students. If Walpole's legacy is to be an ongoing one, we need to hire the best of the best to help our students continue building it. In challenging times, mascots play the important role of unifying communities. The rebel name no longer works for Walpole in this regard. Please take an important step towards unifying our students, athletes, staff, and community members under a new symbol that will contribute to a safe, healthy environment for all. We know that the decision to retire the rebel name would not be an easy one, but we are confident that it will be the right one. We, the undersigned, 60 staff members, stand united and ask the school committee to take decisive final action. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Laura Sacchetti should be coming on, and then on deck is James Bill Cullinane.
Hello, thanks for having me today.
You may begin.
My name is Laura Sacchetti, and I am a Walpole High School alumni, class of 2007, and I'm speaking in favor to change the Walpole Rebels name. The thing about history is that only the past can be written. Only the past can't be changed, but should be used to educate our current and future society on our failures too, in order to improve them on them. As a society, we have no obligation to continue traditions of previous generations, especially when these traditions are symbols of hate and violence and isolate members of our community on basis of race. As for Walpole, Massachusetts history, in the 60s, we had a coach from the South with a Confederate moniker and the nickname General Lee. So, in a time when others were fighting for civil rights, we changed our mascot name from the Hilltoppers to the Rebels. I'm sure I don't need to explain that Massachusetts was never a part of the Confederacy, nor was it a location of a single Civil War battle. Over 100 Union generals did originate from Boston, however, and 14,000 soldiers from Massachusetts gave their lives for the Union side. In 1994, Walpole decided it was inappropriate to wave the Confederate flag at games. To me, this symbolizes that we did at one point acknowledge that the Confederate memorabilia was wrong, but still continued to use the name anyways. As it stands, Rebel fans will still wave the flag for Rebel pride, whether it is officially supported or not. Massachusetts is not perfect, but we do seek change when change is warranted. Names are just names, but in the last few years, we changed Yawkey Way back to Jersey Street, its name before 1977, due to the problematic implications Yawkey had. We also changed Dudley Square to Nubian Square for similar reasons. These are small steps for an overall marathon that needs to be completed, but it is in the right direction. I remember talking to my brother a couple years ago regarding why the Rebels were named the Rebels. when there's no actual connection to the Confederacy.
1 minute.
Which he told me about Coach Lee. What I don't understand is if Massachusetts is home to the rebellion that started this country, why are we honoring the rebellion that tried to tear it apart? I heard a lot of name suggestions to change the rebel name too, but it really doesn't matter. But ultimately, I truly believe that if the Walpole Rebels name is not addressed today, it will continue to be a topic of dispute in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Next up is James Bill Cullinane. And on deck is Erin Foley.
Are we offline?
Oh, hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second, Bill, because the cable, it kicked offline, so he's gonna get it back on. And just while we're waiting to get back online.
Join this meeting because we're previously removed by the host.
Okay, I'll put you back on.
Is there a meeting ID I can plan?
Yep.
Rather than using the one-time?
Give me 1 second so I can get Walpole Cable back on. I'm gonna invite you back on. Hold on 1 second. You want to give me your email address?
Yeah. P-Z-Y-S-K
Yep.
at walpolemedia.tv.
Dot what?
.tv.
PZYSK?
Yes.
One second, we're almost at an hour, so time for a 2-minute break anyways. He's just getting cable back on. Any luck?
Nope. It's not coming back yet.
All right, I'm gonna do this one. Can you give him the link that?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Is it from you?
Mm-hmm. right, Mr. Cullinane, you are on.
Live TV. My name is Bill Cullinane. I'm a Walpole High graduate, class of 2012. I'll get started now. In high school, I loved being a Walpole rebel. Whether I was writing for the Rebellion, playing football for the Rebels, or sitting on the hill at Bird Middle watching baseball, I always had rebel pride. As a high school senior, I was picked as the recipient of the Rebel Award, given to the player that embodies the rebel spirit by my football coaches. That's all just to say that I loved our community and was a true believer in the phrase, rebel pride never dies. However, after reading several posts from friends and former classmates, it occurred to me far too late how uncomfortable the rebel culture must have been for my teammates and classmates of color. While the Confederate flag was removed from Walpole uniforms in the early 90s, Confederate imagery was still prevalent outside the school's walls. I'm embarrassed to admit that I certainly played a role in perpetuating that culture. It sounds crazy to say, but I, like many other teenagers, failed to fully grasp how offensive these Confederate symbols were. I was undoubtedly desensitized to this hateful iconography because it didn't impact my life. I wish that I could have navigated this issue at the time with the perspective that I've gained in the years since. I certainly would have done things differently. When I was 18 years old, I started a summer job in Brookline, where many of my closest coworkers were people of color. I remember several of them remarking that they hated Walpole because we were a racist town. They specifically mentioned the Confederate flag that was hung proudly in a yard neighboring the high school's athletic field. I tried to explain that the flag was hung by a private citizen and that it was condemned by the town and the school committee. I brought up the signs that were erected to cover the flag. Even so, these coworkers explained to me that they didn't feel safe coming to Walpole to play games. Their families didn't feel comfortable sitting in the bleachers. There is something inherently wrong with any symbol that arouses those feelings within a child and his or her family members. With all that being said, I truly believe that Walpole is a good community. I'm proud to be from this town, but Walpole, like every community, has plenty of room to improve.
1 minute.
Walpole Rebels have an incredible tradition, but ask yourself, how much of Walpole's athletic or academic achievement can be owed to a mascot? John Lee and his successors have not won 80% of their football games because the team is called the Rebels. Bill Tompkins didn't win 651 games as the Walpole baseball coach because he was a rebel. I mean, really, the most successful team at Walpole is the Porkers. So the great students and athletes that have gone through Walpole schools were not great because they were rebels. Walpole High School was, and will continue to be, great because of those kids. Every single one of them. I can't justify keeping a team mascot that will make one more student feel unsafe in his or her community. If Walpole is a community as strong and proud as I believe it to be, we will continue to grow and succeed regardless of a mascot. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cullinane.
Aaron Foley and then Rob.
Next up is Aaron Foley, and then on deck is Rob Doan.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, you may begin.
Awesome. Hello, my name is Erin Foley and I'm a rising senior at WHS. The points I would like you all to consider are those of the Black community. I am a white middle-class woman, and just as the majority of this town, I will never understand the systemic racism the Black community endures from society. Therefore, I believe my 3.5 minutes would be best spent speaking as an ally of the Black community. Here are the words of Ann Joseph, a member of the Black community who grew up in Walpole, yet recently moved to Norwood, so she cannot speak today. Begin quote. As a Black student in Walpole Public Schools, I personally always felt a disconnect to the school culture because, as you know, Walpole is a predominantly white neighborhood. It's really disheartening to see the people who want to keep the name be the same people who have Confederate flags in their possession. The name change is just one of many ways Walpole can acknowledge their Black student body and make them feel like they belong, while they already feel out of place. A reminder of hate will always be mentally damaging to the Black student body, no matter how they want to spin the meaning. The name of the change is a step in the right direction, and I feel that Walpole will be doing all of its students of color here by actively letting them know that Walpole doesn't harbor hate but fosters acceptance. End quote.
Please take our words into consideration. There are many voices speaking tonight, but please focus on the voices of the Black community. The past of the rebel name directly affects them. While no one's opinion is invalid, their voices are the ones that carry the most meaning. Many see the rebel name to mean family with no racist connotation. But if that is true, we must accept the members of this family that the name offends. But
I think we lost her. Okay. Thank you, Erin. All right, next up, Rob Doan. And Eric Flamen is on deck. Rob, you can mute your mic and then you can begin.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, hi, my name is Rob Doan. I think most people in Walpole today agree that we don't want to use Confederate symbols as part of the high school mascot anymore. And what we disagree on is whether the rebel mascot by itself is a Confederate symbol. I'm a historian by training, and I currently serve as the curator of a military history museum, one that includes Confederate memorabilia in its collection. What I can tell you is that in the context of high school mascots, the rebel has for decades been specifically and repeatedly used to refer to Confederate rebels. There's a recent dissertation that was published by the University of Southern Mississippi, found that of the 162 high schools across the US that currently use the rebel as their mascot, 77% of them either still use Confederate symbols with it, or they used them in the past and have now dropped them. So when people tell me that the rebel mascot isn't necessarily connected with Confederate imagery, I have to tell them that the numbers tell a different story, because that's exactly what it represents to many Americans all over the country. I fully understand that there are those who support keeping the mascot and don't wish ill will on anybody. The problem is the mascots are symbols that have layers of meanings, both intentional and unintentional. They convey different ideas to different people, whether you want them to or not. For many of us, the Walpole rebel will be forever linked with the romanticized vision of the slave-holding South, and one that trivializes the struggles of those who were denied their civil rights. Now, I'm all for educating students about the Civil War and the critical role that it played in our nation's history. But real learning happens in a classroom, or a museum, or by reading a book, or by having an honest conversation with your neighbor. A high school mascot offers no such opportunity. The sanitized, feel-good version of the past that the rebel mascot represents does a disservice to anyone who truly wants to understand how the war impacted the social and political landscape of our world today.
1 minute.
Last week, my family and I stood out on the street with our neighbors for the graduation parade, and we had the time of our lives. It was so much fun to cheer on the kids and celebrate their accomplishments with them. When it was over, I felt like everybody I talked to expressed the exact same feeling, which is that we need to do this every year. This is a great new tradition. So to me, that says that the town is absolutely open to change and willing to accept new traditions. So let's start another new tradition and allow the next generation of students to create their own memories under a new mascot that truly unifies the school and the town it represents. I understand you all have a tough decision to make with this, and I know that you will disappoint people either way, so I appreciate the difficulty of the job you have ahead of you, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Eric Flamen. And on deck, Cody McCann.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes, you may begin.
Awesome. Hello, my name is Eric Flamen, and I'm a Walpole alumni graduating class of 2008. I'm also a former paraprofessional of 3 years and a former cross-country and track coach for Walpole High School. During my tenure at Walpole, specifically my freshman and sophomore year, I can say that I was proud of the rebel name. However, as I moved into junior and senior year, I started noticing other athletes from other schools not showing up to compete, both football, track, and other sports. And I started hearing rumors that those athletes were primarily people of color, students who are Black, African American, and otherwise. That honestly kind of makes me sad. As I moved away from Walpole, and went on to University of Hartford to compete there at the Division I level. I was surrounded by more athletes who are also people of color, athletes of color, who became my friends and family. When they found out where I was from, the first thing that they said was, "Isn't that the town with the Confederate flag? Isn't that the town with the racist mascot?" I couldn't defend it. I only had to sit there and say yes. And quite frankly, it was embarrassing. As semesters went on and seasons went on, I started to say I was from Boston and no longer from Walpole. Because quite frankly, I didn't want to defend a town that had a racist mascot. These types of conversations continued as I went into the workplace, including up to last week, when I was talking to other coworkers around this conversation that was going to be occurring today and the vote that's going to be happening on Thursday. All of my coworkers were Black, African American, kind of looked at me with disgust, but also gave me props, as well as another alumni of Walpole High School that would be speaking out today against the name Rebel.
1 minute.
I would also like to quickly discuss the impact that the name has had on the town. Walpole has one of the lowest percentages of African Americans and Blacks residents between the surrounding towns. With similar median house incomes, most of the towns range between 3 and 5%. Walpole is at 1.5%. With the towns that have higher incomes, such as Wellesley, Dover, Sherburne, most of those towns are around 2%. And again, Walpole's quite low. So when we discuss the impact that the name has on people moving here, people being hired here, I think it's kind of evident that it dissuades people from coming to the town. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Up next is Cody McCann. And on deck is Jillian Hogan.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Cody. You can begin.
Thank you for holding this forum. My name is Cody McCann. I'm a Walpole High School graduate, class of 2015. A lot of things have been said thus far, and here are my thoughts. I believe we need to change the Rebel name. Whether we like it or not, the Rebel name is tied to the Confederate flag that used to be flown at games at this town. The Confederate flag is a racist symbol that has no business being anywhere, let alone in Massachusetts. Now, symbols are important. Keeping this name as a symbol that is meaningful to people makes sense. But in this context, our hometown of Walpole, my hometown, pride should not trump a racially charged symbol, whether people who support the name think it's racist or not. I've heard it said in different ways over the past couple weeks that the Rebel name means the different thing once you leave Walpole, once you realize what the symbol really means. We can make it a town issue and insulate ourselves from that racial aspect. We could dodge it. The racial aspect of the Confederacy, the symbols tied to the flag, and the symbols tied to the name. But we don't live in a bubble. We are part of the United States of America. Anyone that has town pride, state pride, or American pride needs to know its history and know the bad parts about the history that we continue to learn, and the history I learned at Walpole High. We can't pick and choose what we want and don't want to think about. Another thing I've heard over the past couple weeks is, oh, we've distanced ourselves. It's no longer meant to be a name tied to a racist symbol. Or 1994 get brought up enough times. Or the thought that it was a racist symbol, but no one really thought about it at the time. Well, frankly, it's a little ridiculous to assume that people that brought the Confederate flag to Walpole High were doing it for non-racially charged reasons. I don't know who those people were, but we cannot retroactively cover for these people. The names just gotta go.
1 minute.
The word rebel does not mean anything when it comes to my high school experience. It is the people that I was with that made being a rebel a memorable experience. I loved my time on the basketball team, on the student council, in the film festival, you name it, I did it. I think about those times often, especially on the court. If the name is changed, the memory does not change. It absolutely does not take away anything from my experience. I will still be proud of being from Walpole. In fact, if the name changes, I'll be even more proud. The Rebel name must change. It must. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Cody. Up next is Jillian Hogan, and on deck Lindsay Sullivan. Hi, Jillian, you can unmute your mic and you can begin.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm speaking today as an alumni, teacher, former assistant coach, and parent in the Walpole community in favor of retiring the rebel name. Growing up in Walpole, I was always disturbed by some of the racist comments made by my peers. However, it was not until my sophomore year during a discussion in English class that I began to understand that perhaps these sentiments were fostered by the rebel name. I learned for the first time about the association of Walpole with the Confederacy and the racist iconography of the Confederate flag and rebel name. As a naive and ignorant high schooler, I connected our rebel name with an anti-establishment identity. Yet as I began to learn more about the origins of the rebel name, I became aware that this name legitimized a racist subculture within my hometown. After graduating from WHS, I earned my bachelor's and master's degree in history. The more I have learned about history, the more I am disappointed that my community embraced such hateful imagery in the past and that some continue to do so. I returned to Walpole to teach in 2011 and experienced my own painful growth as an educator. While much has changed for the better at WHS since my attendance, it is clear that not all students feel entirely comfortable in their school and on their sports teams. My first year teaching back in Walpole, I was unprepared to navigate racist comments and actions in the classroom. This isn't something they teach you in your education classes. I was young, white, privileged, and afraid to do or say the wrong thing. Over the past decade of teaching, one of the most important lessons I have learned is that silence speaks volumes, and that when we are silent, other voices will fill that void. As a classroom teacher, I am called to lead by example, by setting a standard in my classroom for what is right. And this is also what we must do as a community. On a personal level, as a parent of 2 toddler boys in this community, I worry about a culture that has embraced racist sentiments in the past, and this has persisted despite our attempts to disassociate from racist connections to the rebel name.
1 minute.
My boys growing up in a community where seeing Confederate flags inside bedrooms or inside helmets is in any way normalized or socially acceptable. Many people feel attached to the rebel identity. However, by affirming their identity and keeping the name, we promote a false narrative of the origin of the rebel name, while at the same time disavowing the identities of Black and brown individuals who have experienced racism and injustice in their daily lives. We must recognize the great disservice our community has done by remaining the rebels for so long. If we want to be a community that embraces everyone, we have to make it clear that racist subcultures are not welcome. We have a powerful opportunity to model for our children how to address past wrongs by facing them head on. Let's truly become a community that is welcoming and safe for all by retiring the rebel name. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. Next up is Lindsay Sullivan, and on deck, Susan Naughton. Hi, Lindsay. You may begin.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Sullivan. I graduated from Walpole High School in 2018, and I am one of the creators of the petition to change the rebel name, which now has over 5,000 signatures. At this potential point of great social change, it should be abundantly clear that one perspective of the world does not represent a universal experience. I was lucky enough to have 4 years at Walpole High School that I will always be grateful. Experience of the world will never be, and that's where this conversation needs to begin. Some of my peers argue for keeping the rebel name because to them, it represents pride, teamwork, and family. I understand these values, and I do not underestimate how much they mean to people in our town. But again, the factor missing is perspective. The conversation cannot end at what the word rebel means to you. The conversation must begin by asking others, particularly Black members of our community, how the rebel name has affected you. The time to listen to and amplify Black voices is long overdue. We can attempt to redefine, rebrand, and argue semantics, but we end up missing the point. Walpole misses the chance to understand each other, to empower one another, and to grow together. We must listen and then draw conclusions, not draw conclusions first and then project. I don't consider changing the Rebel name to be a solution. It is a commitment. Walpole is now presented with the opportunity to say, we want to foster an inclusive and welcoming community. We want to build a school system that celebrates diversity in background and thought. We want to create a classroom that values conversation, understanding, learning, and unlearning. Or we can decide to be complicit. We can't change history. We can't change the fact that Walpole High School used Confederate symbolism, but we can stop perpetuating these injustices. We cannot define the word rebel, but the word rebel has been defining us. The petition comments show that students do not feel comfortable in our halls and that members of surrounding communities do not feel comfortable playing on our fields. Walpole deserves better than that. Seeing the school committee vote to change the Rebel name Thursday would prove to me and many other members of our community that Walpole is ready to make this commitment moving forward. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Lindsay. Up next is Susan Naughton, and on deck, Tammy Ruda. Hi, Sue, we can hear you. You may begin.
My name is Susan Naughton, and I'm a parent in the Walpole Public Schools. I'm in favor of changing the Rebel name because a mascot should unite a school and town, and it's clear that ours is long past its time of bringing people together. However, I'm here today to address the cost. Many people in social media and conversations have said it will be too expensive. I would first say that we can't put a price on the safety and well-being of our students who have clearly said over and over again that the name and symbols make them feel uncomfortable. Without changing the name and its problematic history, any other talk about the importance of diversity and racial justice are just empty words. However, as a public educator, I am well aware of the budget cuts and shortfalls that districts are facing right now. Here's what I've learned from other districts that have changed their Rebel mascots. The school committee should immediately appoint a name change committee made up of key stakeholders willing to help with the logistics and funding of the process. I have no doubt that our young people have the creativity and talent to design a new mascot that they all are proud of. In terms of the costs around changing these things, we shouldn't let perfection be the enemy of progress. Replacing and refinishing areas of the school can be done in stages according to the visibility and importance of the insignia. We can immediately remove the banner from the press box. Removing the word Rebels from the pavement by the concession stand might not happen until the next time it's renovated. This is still progress. In terms of uniforms, preserving the colors would bring down the cost of renaming considerably. About half of the sports teams have no visible Rebel or Sabre insignia. Some teams are budgeted for new uniforms yearly or are slated to have their uniforms replaced next year. Other uniforms could be phased in over a few years. This is still progress. The Name Change Committee can immediately start a GoFundMe. Many residents have already stated they will support, and a local pastor has committed to fundraising through their large congregation and network. If the Name Change Committee can get other community leaders on board, our message can spread far. The Name Change Committee could also immediately start seeking out grants and corporate donations. South Burlington, Vermont received $25,000 from Adidas to change their name from the Rebels to the Wolves. The Godfrey Lee Public Schools raised nearly $200,000 towards their name change, including over $20,000 from a local foundation.
1 minute.
Massachusetts is home to many corporations and sports franchises that may be willing to donate money to such a worthy cause, and the people of Walpole have connections to many of these companies. And I don't mean that statement generally. Some people have already started reaching out to New England-based companies and have garnered interest. A professional writer has offered their services to begin drafting grant applications. There are many different ways to approach the change and many citizens who want to help. While cost is obviously a factor, it seems to me like we can't put a price on doing the right thing. Communities are stronger with mascots that unite rather than divide. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Tammy Ruda, and on deck, Nicole Eckhart. Hi, Tammy.
Hello.
You may begin.
Thank you for holding this forum. My name is Tammy Ruda. I've lived in Walpole since 1999, and both of my daughters were in the Walpole Public Schools from kindergarten through high school. I also volunteer as the high school's debate coach. I want to begin by acknowledging the very important common ground that exists on both sides of the argument regarding the rebel's name. All those speaking share a concern for Walpole students and their educational experiences, a desire to build community and pride, and a belief in the power and value of a sense of belonging. Our goals are the same, but we differ in our interpretation of the impact that the rebel's name has on those goals. To make the decision about whether or not to change the name, we must look at our school's mission and values. The Walpole school system's guiding beliefs include this one: our schools are safe, inclusive, collaborative, and respectful learning environments. The goals that support it include strengthening the social and emotional well-being of the school community, developing thoughtful, responsible, and engaged citizens, and ensuring that resources support student learning and well-being. We also continue to participate in METCO, and its values are very similar. Interestingly, its mission statement says that the program fosters the opportunity for children from Boston and from neighboring suburbs to develop a deeper understanding of each other. I think we've been developing that, actually. According to Iconography 2016, team names, logos, and mascots serve as symbols, which represent characteristics reflective of the school or the ideal image it hopes to convey. In 2001, Iconography and Zinn explained that controversial and insensitive symbols of any kind can, quote, dismiss, differentiate, demean, and trivialize marginalized groups, unquote. Some of our high school students of color have bravely shared that the name makes them and their families feel uncomfortable.
1 minute.
The name has caused people to associate our town with racism. Because of this, we must change the name. Despite arguments to the contrary, this is not an attempt to erase history. We want to acknowledge history and choose what from it we want to celebrate today. The Confederacy, slavery, racism should not be celebrated. Some have suggested that a town referendum or a student-wide poll would be the best way to decide this issue. But majority rule leaves those in the minority unempowered and unprotected. And we're seeing the results of that across our nation right now. I call upon you as the school committee to take action to protect all of our students, not just the majority of them. Removing the rebel's name is a way to open access to a shared sense of community, belonging, and pride to every student and every family in the Walpole schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Nicole Eckert, and on deck, Bonnie Shea. Hi, Nicole.
Hello.
You may
Hi.
begin.
Thank you. My name is Nicole Eckert, and tonight I'm speaking to support the movement to change the Rebels mascot. Thank you to the committee for hosting this meeting tonight and for the opportunity to speak. I'd also like to thank the brave members of the community who worked so hard bringing this matter to the attention of the committee. For context, I was born and raised in Walpole. I attended Walpole Public Schools for my entire K-12 education and graduated from Walpole High in 2006. I was a student athlete with 10 varsity pins and heavily engaged in other extracurricular activities. I have so many fond memories of growing up here, and I once took pride in representing my town as a rebel athlete. But I must admit now that rebel name is a dark spot on those memories. I'm ashamed to admit to new friends that I meet outside of the Walpole community that I once competed as a rebel, and that the mascot is still in use today in my hometown. I know the rebel name has different meanings to different people, and some of those meanings are quite noble. However, we cannot ignore the very prevalent association of the rebel name with the Confederacy, nor can we ignore this town's past use of Confederate symbols. I recognize the town and this committee have continually tried to reject Confederate associations. As many of you know, the first move to ban the Confederate flag from school uniforms happened in 1988. That's the same year I was born. Despite this decision and the movement that followed, I grew up seeing the Confederate flag all over town. And even when I was in high school, in the mid-2000s, the football team was still singing Dixie. Progress has been made, but it is not enough. It is not nearly enough. Even if we could eliminate all the Confederate imagery held by private citizens, the association of the rebel name with the Confederacy still exists, and we cannot erase that history.
1 minute.
That association will always be offensive to a significant portion of the community, myself included. Other members of the community and this committee may not agree with my argument that the association with the Confederacy is a problem, but I hope we can all acknowledge that the rebel name has caused controversy and division for more than 30 years. In light of recent and recurring events demonstrating the injustices that our Black neighbors face on a daily basis, I expect the opposition to the rebel name will continue to grow, and the mascot will become more and more divisive. In closing, I respectfully ask the school committee to change the name of the Walpole mascot. I'm sure we can work together to find a new mascot that will be more inclusive and unify the community, while still representing the pride and tenacious spirit of the people in this wonderful town. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next up is Bonnie Shea. And on deck, Brian Gay.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. How about your camera? Can you try putting on your camera?
I will try.
Try to see if there's a start video on the left-hand corner of your screen. There might be a line through it. Oh, okay. No, you've got another video. We matched up. It's matched up, so you can begin.
Thank you. So my name is Bonnie Shea. I would like to first start by thanking the committee for hosting this forum. Although you can't see me, it is nice to see familiar faces where I am all the way in California. I grew up in Walpole and graduated from Walpole High in 2005. I played field hockey, basketball, track, and lacrosse for the school and other sports for the town. I went on to play Division I field hockey and for the most part look back very fondly at my time at Walpole High. With that said, I am all for changing the name of the Rebels to something more accepting, more inclusive, more welcoming, and to something that doesn't have a history and celebration of racism, which this name and its context clearly does. Fortunately, as many others have brought up, changing the name does not take away from the pride, success, sense of community, memories, and so on. Since the name and the context within which it has been used for more than 20 or 30 or more years was clearly racist and offensive, and without a long and opaque explanation, it is still seen as such, the change would actually create more pride and more of this sense of community we all look back fondly upon. I see an anti-discrimination statement on the Walpole High website, but I wonder how that can be upheld when some might not feel welcome, some might not feel accepted, and some might not even feel safe. As many others have said, this conversation is long overdue as we continue to see widespread systemic injustice, systemic racism, and Black people and Black communities suffering and being killed at the hands of racism. So my question for the committee is, if we look at the US and the world around us, how can we ignore this injustice and continue as if we don't have a role to play in making it better? In my opinion, not changing the name and not embracing this moment would show a lack of empathy, lack of understanding of US and world issues, and lack of leadership. All qualities I think are critical in the field of education.
1 minute.
I also hope, as many others have said, that the name change is just a start to better incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion into educational and athletic experiences in Walpole. There is a lot of work to do, but we can and need to do better and be a small part of positive change. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Brian Gay. And on deck, James Lombardi. Hi, Brian.
Hi.
You may begin.
Okay, so my name is Brian Gay. I'm Walpole High School class of 2007 graduate. And first I just wanted to thank Rachel and Lindsay for starting this petition, and also Michael Amaral for the attention that he's brought to this important issue. So for a little bit of context and background, I grew up in Walpole. I was born in Walpole. My great-grandmother settled in Walpole after moving to this country from Lithuania. My grandfather came back to Walpole after serving in World War II. And then my mother came to Walpole in middle school and attended Walpole High. And then she settled here and raised our family here as well. So we have a long, fond history with the town. I support the name change of the Rebels to a less offensive, less charged name. I think has been stated by many on this call, it's the elephant in the room that this name, the current name, which was started by a name change in 1968, the same year that the civil rights movement was in its height. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Robert F. Kennedy, who was a strong civil rights activist, was assassinated. And George Wallace was running for president, who was a massive segregationist, famous for his policy of segregation in Alabama. So that's really the context that all this started in. The flag is now gone since 1994, as people have mentioned, but the name remains. And the name is associated with that history, which is associated with the Ku Klux Klan as well. And it's offensive to Black people, but to other people as well. It's a legacy that's anti-Black, anti-Jewish, anti-Catholic, anti-queer. So on many levels, that the legacy of the rebel name and the Confederacy with which it's associated is very oppressive for many groups and for many reasons. For me, it's not a matter of if, but how we change the name. I think it's an opportunity for creativity, as has been mentioned. I think we can move to a point of being not only not racist, but anti-racist with a creative name change. So in closing, I'd just like to say, my mother was a rebel. My siblings were rebels. I was a rebel. I was on the cross-country team. I support their choice not to use the rebel name. Tim Giblin has disassociated from the rebel name. I encourage other teams in town, if this should not pass, to take similar action. And I just think it's time. I think it's time to move on and to move in the right direction. So I hope you'll consider my thoughts, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Next up, James Lombardi, and on deck, Timothy Nee. Hi, James. You may begin.
So, I've lived in Walpole my entire life, and I graduated from Walpole High School in 2014. I was a football player and a wrestler for the school. The story that I want to tell you guys is during my time as a sophomore at the high school, when our football team was hazed by the upperclassmen. Before hometown football games, the sophomores were forced to sing the song Dixieland in the locker room with the lights off. The upperclassmen would sing the lyrics of the song, while the sophomores had to kneel and chant, "I wish I was in the land of cotton." For those who don't know or may wish to turn a blind eye to it, know that Dixieland, the song, was born in the mid-1800s as a minstrel show. Minstrel shows were overtly racist and derogatory performances by white actors wearing blackface and depicting horrendously racist stereotypes of Black slaves. Though the song was created in the North, it was so popular in the South that it quickly became accepted as the rallying cry in the Confederacy. This is a song that is sung by your students in your school. The ritualistic hazing shocks me as I think back on it now. I'm obviously extremely ashamed of myself and my teammates for singing the song Dixie and for worshiping the Confederacy during our high school time. The degree to which we had to shut off the lights and essentially pledge allegiance to the Confederacy while completing this racist ritual is something that I will never forget. This song was obviously chosen because of its connection to the rebel name, our rebel name. Regardless of how the school administration may try to disconnect the name Rebel from Confederacy, the students will continue to make that connection and celebrate the Confederacy as they still do to this day.
1 minute.
Their impressionable minds are not impervious to racism and hazing, just as mine is. To expect students to have to stand up to potential bullying and violence when faced with these situations cannot be allowed. It is our responsibility as adults to protect them from this violent and rampant racist culture. It is the moral duty of the school committee to change the name of the Rebels because of its aggressive connection to the Confederacy and to racist extremism. I hope you make the right choice. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. So we don't see Timothy Nee in the queue. If you choose to come back in, we will make sure you have the opportunity to speak. So next we are moving to Ryan Norton. And then up next is Chris Sullivan.
Okay. Oh, there we are. Okay.
Hi, Ryan.
Okay.
You may start.
All right, cool. So my name is Ryan Norton, and I'm a 2005 graduate of Walpole High School. I'm gonna start off by saying I have a lot of civic pride. I got that from my dad, who got that from his mom, who got that from her parents. That is 4 generations of Walpole residents and 4 generations of Walpole High School students. And I have a lot of school pride for the same reason. But it is this very pride that is why I feel compelled to speak in favor of ditching the rebel name. I love this town, and I hate to see it get a negative reputation. Unfortunately, the rebel name has come to tarnish that reputation, and will continue to do so if we perpetuate it. As you're all aware, the name has been given an association with the Confederacy. That is problem number 1. Yes, this to start out as a reference to the fact that we had a coach named Lee and a team named the Rebels, and we tried to pass it off saying, oh no, we don't support those rebels, we support these General Lee's rebels. But that is problem number 2. Why should we have to explain something that we don't have to? I've been on this side where I have to defend my town and say, oh no, that's not what it's about, and it's just so hard to do that. But problem number 3, brandishing a flag. And don't forget that started in 1968, the very year that Martin Luther King was shot, and at the height of the Civil Rights Movement, his opponents were using that flag. It always sent the wrong message. Unfortunately, I've seen firsthand what this has done to our reputation. When I was a freshman, I remember a teammate who was a Metco student, when asked whether he'd move to Walpole, say that his family wouldn't move here specifically because of the flag, even though we didn't actually use it officially at the time. That is a terrible impression his family received, and we are better than that. This town has never done enough to dispel that association. In 1994, we officially got rid of the flag as symbol, but that never quite disappeared. Worse, it was more or less replaced by that knockoff of old Mrs. Colonel Rebs, still a link to the Confederacy, and he was still there when I was a student from 2001 to 2005.
1 minute.
And while we got rid of him also, the symbolism is still present, even though we tried that quote-unquote rebranding a few years ago. If we had at least made it explicitly about the revolution again, which is what it was originally, and my dad was a sophomore, so I know at the time, that's what it officially was when the name changed, that would at least have been a step in the right direction. You know what I find ironic? In the 1980s, we were so worried about our image as being the town with the prison that we actually lobbied the state to have them change the name of it to MCIC Junction. So why don't we have a problem with being the town with the flag? You know, as I read the petition for keeping the rebel name, I noticed almost half the comments had some variation of rebel pride. Rebel pride, rebel pride. But you know what's more important? Walpole pride. I make no bones on how much I love this town.
10 seconds.
Raised family here. So maybe my kids will be rebels, that's fine. My dad wasn't always a rebel, and my grandma certainly never was. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. They'll still be rooting for and possibly playing for the same Walpole and the same Walpole High School that my family has proudly been part of for generations and generations. And that is a tradition worth keeping. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Up next, Chris Sullivan. And on deck is James Conley. Hi, Chris. You can.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You may begin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Sullivan. Thanks for taking the time to listen to both sides. I am speaking in favor of keeping the rebel name. A rebel is a free thinker, someone who rises up against opposition and who exemplifies pride, accountability, leadership, and respect. I was born and raised in Walpole and I'm third generation of my family to do so. I graduated from Walpole High School in 2000, where I played football, hockey, and baseball. My father, brother, and sisters all played sports under the Rebels name. I even won the Rebel Award in my senior season, an award that exemplifies sportsmanship, pride, accountability, leadership, and most importantly, respect. Respect not only for yourself and your teammates, but your opposition as well. I always wanted to raise a family in this town. My wife and I moved outside of Walpole for a few years, but there was always something pulling us back. The close-knit community feel, the wonderful school systems, and yes, the sports teams. These were key factors when we made our decision to move back to Walpole. We wanted our children to have the same experiences we did growing up in this amazing town. We wanted them to experience Rebel pride in its true form, not the way the other side perceives it, but the way it truly is and has always been. We have 2 children, 8 and 6, and my wife and I are very involved in sports for this town. We were fortunate enough to play for coaches that prepared us for life after high school sports, coaches that helped us to see the big picture. As the head football coach at Walpole High School now, I have worked for over 15 years to instill these same core values that I was taught many years ago. Each year, a different group of student athletes step foot on that turf, and each year we teach them all about what it means to be a rebel. A rebel does not hate, a rebel does not see color. A rebel is someone who rises up against the other team or any injustice in this world. A rebel simply works harder than the opposition. Each preseason, I welcome past football players to speak about their time as a rebel and the vast array of accomplishments since graduating.
1 minute.
I watch my team's eyes light up and their hearts open. In that moment, each year, a new rebel family is built. We all know that the times, the world, and our culture has changed, but we need to come together in this time and focus on how wonderful it is to be a rebel. I have witnessed positive change in '94. I was part of Rebranding in 15, and I'll work tirelessly to protect the true meaning of a rebel name in 20. There are far too many unknowns if you were to consider changing the name. For example, the financial impact during a time where we cannot raise any money for our programs. We simply can't afford it. I see the stands at games, I see the spectators, I
10
see many
seconds.
faces tonight that I have never seen at a game. I ask that if you are so passionate about changing this name, that you be just as passionate about supporting our student athletes. At the end of the day, everyone is entitled to their opinion. I value everyone's on this matter. I strongly urge you to consider all sides in this matter. And, all sides of this matter, listen to those of us in the thick of it, wearing the orange and blue, wearing the rebel name with the almost pride. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. All right, up next, James Conley. And on deck, Meredith LaRusso.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, James. Your time begins now.
All right, so thank you for giving everyone an opportunity to speak tonight. This is clearly a topic that our community is passionate about. And by having an open discussion, we're able to weigh all sides and in the end, make an informed decision. So my name is James Conley. I'm a proud graduate of Walpole High School's class of 2008. Currently, I work as a special education teacher at Walpole High School, where I've worked since 2015. Growing up in Walpole, I've had a great experience and I have many fond memories of my time as a rebel. Working at the high school over the last 5 years has given me an opportunity to see Walpole High from a different perspective. Now, when I first started working at the high school, it didn't take me long to realize that not every student had the same affection for the rebel name that I did. And this was particularly true while we were making the movie Pride for the Walpole High Film Festival. Though I had never thought of the name as a racist one, I had certainly put on blinders to the clear link the name had to the Confederacy and what that represented outside of the bubble of Walpole. I needed to take a step back to understand how this could look from someone else's perspective. In my time teaching, I've had a number of students express they are uncomfortable with the rebel name. One that stands out is from my first year at the high school. This student cited the rebel name as one of the reasons that he had stopped playing sports. Now, students should feel comfortable when they're representing their school, shouldn't they? And on a related note, I've seen some students desensitized to what the Confederate flag represents because they're using it to show school pride. I had one student get suspended for running across the football field during a game while waving the Confederate flag. I've also seen students attach Confederate flags to the back of their trucks once they're off school property. I even had a student who got a Confederate flag tattooed on his bicep. We've unsuccessfully tried to separate the rebel name from the Confederate flag for the last 26 years. And by not changing the name at such a vulnerable time in our country's history, we're sending the wrong message to our students.
1 minute.
My family has lived in Walpole ever since my great-grandfather decided to start his bus company here back in 1943. I know what it means to have rebel pride, but as an educator, it's my job to look out for the best interest of all students, not just some. Many people are worried that changing the name would change the history that goes along with it, and I hate to inform you that's not how history works. In fact, changing the rebel name would be making history, and it would be changing the future for our students. I encourage that everyone listens to all sides of this discussion and I ask that we remove how we personally feel from the equation, because quite frankly, none of this is actually about us. We need to take a step back and look at the whole picture and ask ourselves what's in the best interest of
10
all of our-
seconds.
That's it, thank you.
Thank you, James. Up next is Meredith LaRusso. And on deck is Jane Vanderlinden. Sorry. Jan. Okay.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, Meredith, you may begin.
Thank you. Tonight, I would like to share my personal experiences on how the rebel name represents our town to those who live beyond our town lines. I've always lived in Walpole, but once I moved into Stonehill College in 2017, I could immediately tell that I had been living in a bubble. I have many classmates from Massachusetts, and when they asked where I was from, it was impossible to ignore the many negative reactions when I revealed my hometown. Nearly every response was related to the Confederate flag. People asked me if my town was full of racists, if I was racist, if the flag still hung, and I was shocked. At school, living in Walpole came to mean that I would have to defend my personal beliefs against the perceived beliefs of my hometown when someone recognized our name. To others, the rebel name is passive racism, an example of white silence giving our town an excuse to use a racist symbol and call it pride. And suddenly, I had become a representation of that belief without ever feeling that I could identify as a rebel comfortably. Frankly, it's embarrassing. Many believe that rebels has a specific meaning in Walpole, that the name does not carry the same connotations it once did when Coach Lee donned the Confederate flag as a symbol of school pride. Instead, the name Rebels doesn't mean that anymore. It's now a symbol of hometown pride and sports accomplishments. But if this symbol in Walpole is not racist, then what is it? It is certainly unpatriotic nonetheless. Besides, everywhere else for all of history, the Confederate flag has represented racism. And this town married that flag all too easily to our rebel name for us to try and erase this symbolism with our weak claim that our town identifies this name and in turn that flag with, quote, other meanings. I mean, how ludicrous is that claim? Is it the right of Walpole's predominantly white population to decide when racism no longer applies to this name, once so closely linked to the Confederate flag? Are we willing to continue defending our insulting and shocking reputation at any cost? Or is it time for a change that upholds an identity that everyone in our town can feel connected to? The truth of the matter is, Walpole High School has been, and will continue to be connected to the Confederate flag so long as we are the rebels. And the flag has been, and will continue to be a symbol of racism and oppression in our nation. Our past is still our past, and people in other places only see us as that flag, and that's it. To others, we are tolerant of, if not overtly supporting, racism. No matter how hard we try, we cannot erase this identity. But we can move away from it by renaming ourselves. Removing the rebel name is our only option. So many articles on this issue have brought our name to the attention of several parts of the state. Now is our chance to affirm our town's commitment to fighting racism. This decision will lay in our town's history forever. Please be aware of the gravity of your vote. However, a new name is just a start. Changing this racist reputation will take consistent and concerted efforts to represent ourselves with anti-racist beliefs. For example, drastic and immediate education reform.
1 minute.
Renaming is just the first step in our journey to racial justice. I hope you'll make the right choice on Thursday, and thank you for my time tonight.
Thank you, Meredith. Up next, Jan Vanderlinden. And on deck is Michael Frankel.
Hi there.
Hi, Jan. We can hear you. You may be, Jan, I'm sorry, reading it incorrectly.
No worries.
I'm sorry. You may begin.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. My name is Jan van der Linden. I have lived in Walpole for 22 years and have 4 kids that have gone or are going through the Walpole schools. But I grew up in Belgium, in Europe, and some of my fondest childhood memories have to do with the holiday of St. Nicholas on December 6th, when kids get lots of presents and toys and treats. And one figure associated with this holiday is St. Nick's helper, Black Peter, Zwarte Piet, depicted by a white man who would paint his face black and put on bright red lip. We didn't think anything of this. In my mind, in everyone's mind, St. Nicholas and Black Peter were associated with complete joy and happiness. It wasn't until I moved to the US as an adult that I started to realize how wrong and offensive this was. And to realize that something you've cherished so much is fundamentally wrong, that kind of shakes your core. And so I empathize with those people who want to hang on to the rebel name. For the vast majority of them, it has nothing to do with racism. For them too, it brings up memories of some of their most joyful and proud moments, either being part of a rebel team or watching their kids play in a rebel team. But I implore those people to let go. None of the Confederacy symbols and practices had any business being introduced into this town. It was a mistake. We stopped singing Dixie or waving Confederate flags at football games. We got rid of the emblems on uniforms. We just have to remove the last remnant of this mistake and change the rebel name. So you have a choice to make, members of the school committee, and it comes down to how you want to be remembered. Because this is the vote that you will be remembered for. This is the vote that will define you. The forces of history are working towards greater emancipation and greater respect for minorities of all kinds. Sometimes we take a few steps backwards, but generally we move forward. Even if this vote fails, it will be just a matter of time before it is brought back up and the rebel name is voted out.
1 minute.
I read that there are 300 other schools in this country that use the rebel name, and that in most of them the same debate has broken out. Do we really want to be the one of the last towns standing? And how would you feel voting against the name change if in 2 or 3 years the future Walpole School Committee unanimously votes to get rid of the name? I think you will feel that history passed you by, and your grandchildren will agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Michael Frankel.
I have, you can hear me.
Yep, your name matches, so you're good. You can talk.
Okay, thank you. I was trying to get the video going, but anyway, let me talk. My name is Michael Frankel. I've been a resident in Walpole now for nearly 29 years. During this time, our 3 children have received a first-rate education from the Walpole school system. All of our kids also participated in Walpole High School sports teams, and I should also add that I coached Walpole youth sports for many years. And my kids are now grown out of the house and good, productive citizens in their own right, and I'm proud to make Walpole my home. So having shared my background, I also want to share a long-held view that associating Walpole pride with the name rebels and its connotations to slavery, Confederacy, and racism is wrong. To me, the sense of pride representing Walpole is exactly that. It's of residing in the Walpole community, celebrating its rich history. Walpole pride has absolutely nothing to do with being a rebel. The sad and disturbing events in the recent George Floyd killing are obviously bringing the rebel name change to the forefront. All of you on the school committee now have in front of you the opportunity to get the call right, and also to be on the right side of history. I strongly urge you to demonstrate courage, sensitivity, and decency, and vote to remove the rebel's name and its clear linkage with such a dark and racist time in our country's history. As a further thought, I believe that it is both unfair and impractical to ask our children a diverse group of current and future generations of Walpole students to get behind a school name that's inevitably associated with this dark period. By your efforts and success at eliminating the Rebels name and all the negative aspects associated from it, you're actually going to contribute to generating even greater pride for our town from our students and residents.
1 minute.
So thank you for hearing my views in favor of changing the Rebels name.
Thank you. Sorry about saying who's going to be on deck. We had a couple people in the queue who are no longer in the queue. So up next will be Bridget Canal, and then on deck is Liana Cosgrove.
Hi.
Hi, Bridget. We can hear you, so you may begin.
Great. I'm a 2016 WHS graduate who has lived in Walpole my whole life. When I met students who played sports from other towns or coworkers who went to other schools, they always noted that Walpole was a proudly racist town, mainly because of our mascot. At this point, the conversation about changing the Rebel name has been going on for years. A large part of the argument to keep the name is that it does not carry a racist connotation. In addition to the historical significance of the Rebel name aligned with the Confederacy, as well as it being brought to Walpole hand in hand with the Confederate flag, the thousands and thousands of people in this town signing a petition this month that claims the Rebel name does have a racist connotation have made it so that from here on out, every single time somebody in Walpole says the word rebel, no matter what side of this argument they are on, they will recall this feud over the racism of the symbol. They will remember the choice that you made on this matter this week. It is a historically racist symbol, and its connotation to racism will never be forgotten, especially in this town. With the residual weight of this vote, there will be no plausible deniability that the Rebel name has a connection to racism. If you, the school committee, vote to keep the name, you are willingly turning a blind eye to racism. You are condoning it, and you are supporting it. What will happen if you change it? People will talk about it for a few years, maybe. People might roll their eyes. Children will wear different uniforms than their parents, which is already the case for many since the Confederate flag is no longer on those uniforms. What will happen if you keep it? You will be taking a defiant stance to side with a symbol of racism when you are given an option otherwise. Your characters will be called into question. Black people and people of color who play sports in this town will have to wear jerseys displaying a name derived directly from the Confederacy in the Civil War. And they will remember, and we will all remember, the decision that you made this week.
1 minute.
If we change it, we can move on. If we don't, we will never forget that choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Next up is Liana Cosgrove. And on deck is Philip Chazgorowski.
Hi, my name is Liana Cosgrove, and I've been a Walpole resident for 11 years. Our two daughters attend Boyden School. I've been teaching kindergarten in Boston public schools for nearly a quarter of a century, and I found that when there's a tough decision to be made, it is often more effective to ask questions than to give answers. So instead of telling you what to do, I'm going to ask you questions that I hope will help you find some clarity and make a choice that reflects your own personal beliefs and ethics. First, if a person considers something to be offensive, but you do not find it offensive, is it offensive? If a person views something as painful and threatening, but you don't find it painful and threatening, is it painful and threatening? If you answered no to either or both of those questions, here's a follow-up question. What if it wasn't just one person who was offended or threatened? What if it was 10 people or 50 people or 100 people? How many affected people would it take for you to justify their experiences? Next, if we take into account historical events that all Americans would consider deeply reprehensible, such as slavery or segregation, would the argument, "But we've always done it that way," still be an effective way to legitimize an action? We used to keep people as property. We used to label water fountains. Throughout history, There have been significant moments of deep reckoning for our country, including this one right now. As you know, there is now bipartisan support to rename landmarks and military bases across the country. Every day is bringing new stories of organizations re-examining their way of thinking and doing. At what point do we as a town decide that our way of doing things is wrong and therefore obsolete and in need of change? And lastly, after the many people who have and will personally testify that this name and mascot is offensive, racist, and wrong, if we ignore those voices and continue with the status quo, what are we teaching our children and our Commonwealth about who matters in this town?
1 minute.
I've lived in Boston for 12 years before moving here, and listening to the testimony tonight makes me feel tremendously proud about being a resident of Walpole for one of the first times ever. I thank you for listening to this for hours and hours, and I applaud you. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Philip Chakarowski. And on deck is Will Domino.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Philip Chakarowski, RTM member, Precinct 7, also a member of the Walpole Peace and Justice Group. And I have 3 children who all went through the Walpole public school system. And I really want to thank the school committee for taking all this time and hearing all of these comments. I urge you, the school committee, to vote to replace the rebel mascot. Symbols send powerful messages about identity and values. Symbols of the Confederacy, including the rebel name, are strongly associated with a long history of slavery and racism, segregation, violence against blacks, and white supremacy. Use of Confederate imagery started with the Lost Cause movement of the late 19th century. That movement recast the Civil War as a noble cause for the South and denied that the war was even being fought for slavery, to preserve slavery. Confederate imagery was then used when the racist Jim Crow laws were enacted. It was used during the days of the Civil Rights Movement by racist groups fighting desegregation. And it continues to be used today by white supremacists and hate groups. Walpole may try to recast the rebel name, but it's not possible to remove the association with the Confederacy and racism. This mascot carries great offense and discomfort for many people, both in and outside of Walpole. We owe it to our entire community to do the right thing and remove the rebel name. Changing the mascot name at this time of the discussion about racism that's going on with the killing of George Floyd is an opportunity for Walpole to join in that discussion and acknowledge our past history. Changing the mascot name would foster an important teaching moment in our schools and our town in regarding the 400-year history of slavery and racism in the United States. Changing the name would enable Walpole to select a mascot that truly represents our identity and our values. And changing the mascot name would give us an opportunity to show that Walpole is indeed inclusive and welcomes all to our community.
1 minute.
Now is the time to change it. And again, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Next up is Will Domino, and on deck is Marissa McLean.
Hi, my name is Will Domino. I'm a student at Walpole, and I'm going to be speaking in support of the rebel name. From as far back as I can remember, Friday nights in the fall, me and my youth teammates would go to the high school and watch the Rebels play football. This inspired all of us to want to put on the blue and orange and become a rebel and play football there. And now that I'm in high school, I understand the true meaning of being a rebel. No matter where you come from, what your race is, what your background is, we're all working together for a common goal, and we're a family, no matter what. now that I'm here, I understand what it means to be a rebel, and that we stick together no matter what's going on in our community, and we're always working together for a common goal. No matter what the past of the rebel name is, no matter what the negative connotations are, we know that this has nothing to do with our current name. We are the current meaning of being a Walpole rebel is just being a family and having respect for each other. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Next up is Marissa McLean. On deck, Kelsey Evelyn. I'm going to mute Laurie Fitzgibbons. Just hold on. We'll get you in a minute. Yeah, we'll get you in after Melissa, and then we'll have Kelsey. So Marissa, you can unmute your mic, and we'll see if we can get you on video.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great.
You may begin.
Good evening. I moved to Walpole in 2018, and it's a great family community. I believe we need to select a mascot to better reflect all families in our community. I have become aware of and greatly appreciate the pride that is embodied in our school's athletic programs. In fact, it's one reason we found Walpole to be an appealing community to raise our daughter, who will be entering the school system in fall. However, I remain troubled that the school mascot appears to bond a group of people while disenfranchising other people, including some children playing sports for the Walpole Rebels. That is not the purpose of a school mascot. A mascot serves as a way to bond the school community. It's a way to build identity and to create unity between diverse groups within the school community. A mascot that was associated with Confederate symbolism for decades is not a mascot that will ever be associated with unity amongst all members of the school. In my heart, I don't believe that this town adopted Confederate symbolism and songs out of a sense of supporting racism or white supremacy. However, the fact is that Confederate symbols such as the rebel flag and the song Dixie are present-day symbols of racism, segregation, and white supremacy. And to this day, there remain swords on the logo of a Walpole High School sports team uniform and on its social media page on Twitter. I question if that's a holdover from the prior use of the Confederate symbolism, and if it's not, I don't know what the swords mean in relation to how we've rebranded. It's time for us to take a stand and completely sever our connection to these icons of hatred and division, and choose a mascot that is more representative of our values and growing diversity. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Laura, you're up next, and then Kelsey's on deck. So Laura, you can turn on your camera, unmute. You just need to unmute.
I hope everyone's having a good Tuesday. I just want to say thank you to the school committee for taking all of this time to listen to everyone's concerns. It's been a long meeting and you're really hanging in there, so thank you. A commenter tonight said that making this change would be fragile. I have seen the intense pushback that this topic invokes in our community, and I just want to say to all of the young people who've been brave enough to speak out about this, we as a community are proud of you. The countless teams have already changed their names. Darlie, Lindsay, Rachel, Renal, Nathaniel, before any of you, Michaela, Max, and Ellie, and well before any of us, Michael. You are all the farthest thing from fragile. Personally, I don't think it should take very much hand-wringing or soul-searching to fully distance ourselves from Southern white supremacy in a Massachusetts town. I've heard from many families that they are uncomfortable with our mascot, but they don't feel safe coming forward about it. I think we really need to let that sink in. I've also heard from people who don't feel safe moving here or working in our town because of this. Because of all that, it's time to stop putting any pressure on POC kids in our school system to explain why it's wrong,
and start putting the pressure on adults to explain why this doesn't bother us. Because with everything that's happening in the world, it should absolutely bother us. I've seen this issue hang over our kids like a storm cloud. Just imagine if every few years, instead of news stories checking in to see if we're still racist, we could shift the focus back to the achievements of our kids and the good that they do every day for the world. That's the kind of Walpole where I want to raise my kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelsey, coming up now, and then on deck is Christina Forrester.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Dr. Kelsey Evelyn. My husband Giovanni Morant and I are Walpole residents and the parents of two biracial Walpole public school students. We would like to express our concerns regarding the Walpole High School's rebel mascot. The mascot's historical ties to Confederate symbolism, including Walpole High School's own playing of the song Dixie at football games, and the few decades of fans and students displaying the Confederate flag at games, school events, and in those keepsake yearbook photos, make it impossible to separate the rebel mascot from Walpole High School's own historical usage of it. Yes, the word rebel has several meanings. However, if even one of those meanings conjures the historic pain and oppression of American slavery, then any school, and most assuredly ours, should naturally steer clear of that word when it comes to its mascot. Some have used the cost of changing our uniforms as a reason to keep the rebel mascot. Our view is that the financial burden of changing the name on a uniform is a relatively small price to pay to adequately address this for our community. The futures of Walpole and Walpole High School deserve to be freed from the hurtful baggage of a mascot steeped in Confederate iconography. We strongly oppose the continued use of this mascot in connection with our schools. Also, please vote in our town elections on June 27th. If you're not registered to vote, please get registered for future elections. Your voices need to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Christina Forrester. And on deck is Brian Gaffey.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Christina Forrester, and I am a junior at Walpole High School, and I think it is completely necessary to change the rebel name due to a history that will always be linked to the racism and hate. Changing the name would take into consideration the well-being of every student at Walpole High School. In an attempt to gain the perspective of the opposing view, I have talked to my fellow peers, and one of the main arguments is this idea that people who want to keep the rebel name do in fact agree that the term stems from racism, but claim that the meaning of rebel has changed and no longer connects to the Confederate Army. However, it is not the responsibility of the white population to say when a racist term has changed. For centuries, people of color have been enslaved, murdered, stripped of all human rights, and silenced, and some of these injustices still exist in modern-day America. Therefore, no white member of this town can begin to understand how it feels to see a daily reminder of the Confederate rebels who tried to perpetuate the hateful oppression while walking into a place that is supposed to be a welcoming environment. Those who say the meaning has changed have not taken into consideration the perspective of every Black student, teacher, or town member and how they feel when they hear the name rebel. I myself cannot even speak on how truly affected our Black community is, but I stand here using the privilege that I have to say that I hear them, I empathize with them, and I stand with them. Because the only true way to stop the unrelenting cycle of racism is to make every one of these students at Walpole High School feel comfortable is to change the name entirely. Another argument is that the name holds too much team spirit, culture, and love within the school. Therefore, our town cannot change the name that built that. However, the graduation parade that occurred last week reflects the inaccuracy of this opinion. When it came to the inevitability that the class of 2020 would miss out on the traditional celebrations like prom and graduation, our school and our town came together and formed the parade. And as someone who was in the celebration with my family, I can attest to how truly special and inspiring it was to see the hundreds of townspeople outside on the route to express their love and pride in the seniors at Walpole High School.
1 minute.
This is what a true sense of community is. This is what true pride, spirit, and culture looks like. And this parade would have been just as powerful no matter our mascot. This is because a school is not built simply on a name, but the people within it. Therefore, changing the name would not and should not demolish the strong bonds between teammates, but will instead make it stronger by being inclusive to every student at Walpole High School. I truly believe that this high school is bigger than the Rebel name and its racist past. Therefore, we should finally fix the long overdue injustice by changing the name Rebel. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Brian Gaffey, and on deck is Tucker Haswell. Is it?
Hazel.
Oh, Hazel, excuse me. Hi, Brian.
Hi.
You may begin.
All right. Hello. My name is Brian Gaffey, and I'm a graduate of Walpole High School from the class of 2009, and currently I'm the robotics team coordinator at Walpole High School. I'm speaking tonight in favor of changing the Rebel name. I do so not because I believe anyone in our town harbors racist thoughts or ill intent with the current interpretation of the name, but because of the way the Rebel name casts a shadow over a great town we represented elsewhere. One experience that has always stuck with me was my trip to the Robotics Championship in 2007. As a team, we traveled down to Atlanta, Georgia to compete against high schools from all over the country and the world in the Georgia Dome. One day, while we were eating lunch nearby at the CNN Center, some older locals approached us, starting off the conversation noting our school attire with all of its iconography and the word rebels written across it. As they found out that we were from a small town from just outside of Boston, they were very surprised about it, but they thanked us for fighting the good fight up north and ended the conversation by noting that the South will rise again, and went off on their way. At first, we just sort of laughed this off as cartoonishly stereotypical and tried to move along. But the interaction has lingered, and we just couldn't believe that it had happened. That wasn't the rebels we knew or supported in town. When we returned home, we spoke as a team, reflecting on what it was like to be a rebel all the way down in Georgia, and decided that it was just not a legacy that we wanted to be associated with. As a team at the time, we decided that since we were from New England, we could tie being a rebel back to the Revolutionary War, and this is something the robotics team still does now, 13 years later, because of this incident. But it's always felt like a hollow bandage to me, partly because when you lead a successful rebellion, as our founding fathers did, they're not really considered rebels, they're considered revolutionaries. And also partly because of this lasting impression of what the word rebel means to everyone who is outside of our town and sees it. Routinely still, as we compete across New England, when other towns approach us, we've gone from being known as the town with the prison, unfortunately, to the town that has a giant Confederate flag.
1 minute.
As I continue to educate myself and others about experiences and the rebel name, I feel the only way that we can get our town away from this image we still outwardly project to the world is to change the rebel name. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brian. Up next, Tucker Hazel. And on deck, Ellie Hilty. Waiting for Tucker. I don't see Tucker. All right. Tucker, if you want to come back on, I don't know if you just got off, but you're more than welcome to come back on, and we'll put you right in the queue and get you right back on. So let's go to Ellie Hilty. And on deck will be Samantha Hume. Tucker, I see you just came in, so just hold on 1 second, and we'll go to Ellie and then go right back to you, Tucker.
Hi there, can everybody hear me?
Yes, you may begin.
Wonderful. Okay. My name is Ellie Hilty, and I am a graduate of Walpole High School class of 2016. I went on to get an undergraduate degree from Emerson College in film production. My interest in media was established through the wonderful opportunities provided to me through the journalism and film programs at Walpole High. While I was a senior, I co-directed a documentary about this town, titled Pride, which premiered at the Walpole Film Fest in 2016. We chose to make this film in order to bring light to the controversy over the rebel name and its Confederate ties. We were students, we were young, and we chose to document both sides of the issue to the best of our abilities for the sake of journalistic integrity. While researching, we heard a range of stories and experiences in connection with the rebel name. It all centered around one main thing: pride. That's why we chose the title for our film. It's a common thread when speaking about this town, the sense of community, the pride felt by its residents. While researching, we combed over decades of yearbooks, heard stories of the football championships from the players themselves. I urge you to watch the film, posted on the Walpole Film Festival YouTube page, and you can see the jarring images for yourself. You cannot redefine a symbol. A name is a symbol, and the symbol here is tied to hundreds of years of oppression of Black people in our country. You cannot choose what a symbol means. This is a community in which I moved to halfway through my junior year of high school. I can confidently say that I never felt fully welcome here. I do not identify with living in this town. I do not say I'm from here or reside here unless prompted. I graduated from here, played varsity field hockey for this school. I was editor of The Rebellion, the school paper, and directed a movie at the Film Fest. I tried to become a part of it in every way I could, and I never really succeeded. My heart goes out to the people of color in this town, as I am all too familiar with this feeling of being an outsider. I do not wish to equate my experience to that of Black community members, but I do empathize with the experience of feeling different from all the others in a small, extremely white town, the polar opposite of the diverse Californian experience that I left behind.
1 minute.
Every student in this country is entitled to a free and appropriate public school education. How can someone's education be deemed appropriate if it is not safe, inclusive, and intersectional? I humbly ask that the school committee votes to change the rebel name. I want to be proud of the town from which I graduated and now reside. I hope the community is able to show empathy and inclusion and make this overdue change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Okay, next up is Tucker. So you can put your camera on, we'll unmute you. Or you can unmute yourself. All right, if you're having trouble and we can't hear you and you're having internet connection, you can shut your video off, and that might help with your sound.
Hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, my name is Tucker Hazel. I'm an athlete who has been born and raised in the Walpole community. Playing under the rebel name has always meant a lot to me.
You're on mute.
No, we can hear him.
We can hear you, Tucker.
We can hear you, Tucker.
We can hear you.
As a kid, worked hard every day to get the spot I'm in as a part of the Rebels. I can remember from when I was younger going to all the high school games and watching every athlete going out onto the field, red in their blue and orange uniform with the words "Rebels" across their chest. People, this term can be thought of as racist, but everyone who has worked hard and fought against rebels, fought against all odds for their team. The term rebels means way more than a racist word. Getting rid of the name would ruin the culture of the school. As a part of the football team, I know that rebel pride is about the family bonds I've made with everyone along my journey through high school. I hope that you can understand where we come from when we say that the term has a new meaning as we are able to understand its past. Instead of having us change our name, let us add our new meaning to the word and let the town's rebel pride live on. I would also like for people to stop saying that we support the Confederate flag because of a history we cannot undo. We have done our part to remove any negativity. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker. Thank you, Tucker. Next up is Samantha Hoon.
Javon Jackson.
And then on deck is Javon Jackson.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Samantha, you may begin.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Samantha Hun. I graduated from WHS in 2015. I've lived in Walpole my entire life, and I'm currently a student at Northeastern Law. Firstly, I want to call attention to just acknowledge the lack of representation of folks of color in this town and in this very meeting. I encourage people to not think that this is an accident, but rather an example of the continued effects of a long history of institutional segregation and oppression. I will not speak on behalf of Black voices, nor will I pretend that my experience, even as a non-Black person of color, carries nearly the same historical weight or pain in this conversation. I've noticed that many folks in this conversation today have mentioned growing up with school pride and not knowing the racial implications of their rebel name until after graduating. For me, this was never the case. Growing up, the rebel name, and by extension, the Confederate iconography that continued to be celebrated by many of my classmates far past its official retirement, symbolized countless instances of my exclusion and pain as a young woman of color struggling with my identity in ways that I am still unlearning and healing from even in adulthood. Through this, and having since had the privilege of working in Boston public schools with predominantly Black and brown children, I have come to understand how much it means for children of color to be represented, witnessed, and told that who they are matters. When you not only tell children their histories, but center and uplift their current lived experience and voices, they become empowered, active community members who are curious to learn and eager to engage. My students' courage and confidence in their identities is something I desperately wish I had had as a child of color growing up in this town. Our town would be lucky to have so many students that felt proud to be here, but sadly I have heard the stories of far too many people of color like me for whom that was not the case growing up, and will not be the case until we not only distance ourselves from, but explicitly denounce the racist history of the rebel name, continue to implement anti-racist initiatives and curriculum, and affirm that students of color, but most especially Black students of color, matter.
1 minute.
Thank you.
Just finished before your 1 minute. Thank you, Samantha.
Yeah.
All right. Next up is Javon Jackson. And Amanda LaFleur is on deck.
Can you hear me? Am I all set?
I can hear you. I don't know if you want to turn on your, let's see, there you are. You may begin, Javon.
Jackson, former alumni of Walpole and the MECO program. In the recent days, weeks, and months, the world at hand has come to a halt, and in this time, the world has stood up and taken a knee. It made clear that the plight of being African American in this nation is over. For 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the world watched as a Minneapolis police officer placed his knee on George Floyd's neck while handcuffed and on the ground. For many, this was a shocking display of inhumanity, and for some, this was just another warning of people who look like me and feel like me that this too is a daily possibility. For many who look like me and feel like me, we hear the rebel name and often see a Confederate flag raised in honor in our presence. Every time that name is mentioned, every time it's chanted across the field, and every time that name is praised and honored, and I quote, honor. Many continue to say that being a rebel is about family, camaraderie, but how is that if the name you carry separated so many in its bloody history and the current local community? Changing the meaning of word does not work. I think a Black author and activist, E.G.O. Malone, puts it in simple terms. Words have power. Words are more than their dictionary definition. The history of a word matters as long as the effects of that history are still felt. And if you look at our current climate, our dark history associating the rebels with the Confederacy still follows us because students who look like me are treated as second classes. When the rebel name is screamed, it is praising slavery, transformation. Black people who are underrepresented in this very town on every level, from students to teachers to committee members to council members on every level. Systemic oppression is real. It is present. On behalf of all those who may look like me and feel like me, I ask you to think about all those children who you praise the rebel name. This is the time when most Americans are embracing change and are embracing the thought that we are all equal. This is the time that we represent what we represent. The community of Walpole under a new name that represents not only a few, but all who can't call Walpole home. The rebel name is not the end of the conversation. It shouldn't be. I urge educators and administrators to carry the conversation further. We must accept that there is more work to be done to make sure every student feels safe and represented in the town of Walpole. I'm truly frustrated. I'm angry. I have courage and I have hope that you will do what is right, most importantly what is necessary. This is an era of change and is an era of progress. So I don't know what more can be said or how many more conversations can be held, but I have hope once again. Thank you, Ms. Goff. Thank you to the school committee, and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Javon. All right, next up is Amanda LaFleur, and on deck is Sharena Lusant.
Hello,
Hi, so my name is Amanda LaFleur, and I'm the mother of two future Walpole high school students. I agree so much of what has already been said this evening, and I'm heartened and hopeful by so many citizens of Walpole, past and present, wanting to make a change for good. I'm especially proud of so many students using their voices to lift others and make positive change. Because you've all given so much of your time to hear so many share their views on this issue, I will make this as brief as possible. Our family moved here to Walpole from Colorado 3 years ago. I grew up in a town much like Walpole, predominantly white and also home to the rebels, the Columbine rebels. I, like many until the last 5 years or so, did not understand the offensive and racist nature of the Confederate flag. As one of the very few Jewish citizens of the town I grew up in, I know firsthand how psychologically abusive symbols of racism are. World War II is long over, as is slavery in the United States, but the symbols of hate still hurt no matter how much they are quote unquote rebranded. For those who have lived here in Walpole all their lives and raised their rebels, I get feeling a strong emotional attachment to the name and the rally of Rebel Pride. But you must know that when you Google Rebel Pride, there is no football, Walpole High School, Columbine High School, or even American Revolutionist. It's page after page of Confederate flags and imagery. I know change is hard. It's uncomfortable and scary, but what is even more frightening is a citizen's willingness to choose a brand over its neighbors. While changing the name may feel like an overreaction or an oversensitivity, I can assure it is not. Changing the name is very simply the right thing to do. Our family is so happy to have moved to Walpole and made friends, or we're so happy to have made the friends we've made and met the people we've met. Walpole is a very generous and thoughtful community. Just look how much we've all helped each other through COVID. We just need to make this change to prove not only to ourselves, but to those who move here in the future, help them know that Walpole is an inclusive and diverse community. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Next up is Sharena Lusat. And on deck is Laura McClellan.
Hi.
Hi, Sharena. You may begin.
Thank you. My name is Sharena Lucent, former president of Students for Equality and WHS graduate class of 2019. Over the past couple of weeks, I have seen comments from students who don't want to change the name. However, I was able to explain to them that their understanding of Rebel Pride is different from my own experience. The history of the name Rebels makes a clear connection to the Confederacy, the same Confederacy that was fighting a war to try to keep people who look like me enslaved. The so-called Rebel family made going to school a bad experience for me and many people who look like me. I am simply speaking out for those people who have to hide in the shadows in order to maintain their social capital in their school and in their community. Student Equality gives all students of color a safe space to express themselves in any way, shape, or form. Students of color should be able to do that no matter the environment, because that is the sort of equality we deserve from our school, our peers, and our educators. The world is a constant reminder of hatred for Black students, and the education system is supposed to be the educator on making this better, not worse. If you keep the Rebel name, you'll keep students who look like me hiding in the shadows, but you'll also be telling them that you want them to stay there. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Laura McClellan. And on deck, we've got Hannah Meridian.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You can begin.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee, and I'd like to acknowledge all the previous and forthcoming speakers and the time that you're all taking to raise your voices on this issue. I believe the question that you have before you this evening is one about the impact that our community has when we use the Rebel Pride mascot. Although many may not intend for the Rebel Pride mascot to be interpreted as racist, we must honestly acknowledge that that Rebel Pride and the Rebel name refer to and are deeply rooted in the history of Confederate soldiers who fought to keep slavery and protect states' rights to utilize human slave labor for wealth creation. Today, when one looks up The meaning of rebel pride, one finds videos espousing white supremacy, images connected to the Confederacy, and definitions related to individuals identifying as racist. Furthermore, as many others have said this evening, our town has a long history with the rebel name being connected to the Confederate flag and other Confederate symbols and songs which are broadly accepted as promoting white supremacy. Regardless of our intentions, unfortunately, the Rebel Pride mascot is inherently tied to racist beliefs, and continued promotion of Rebel Pride has the impact of perpetuating systemic racism. Systemic racism comes in many forms, and it's all of the large and small ways that we devalue Black lives. When we tolerate or do not speak out against systemic racism, we are complicit. Keeping the Rebel Pride mascot is a form of being complicit. It should be noted that change in the name does not minimize the athletic accomplishments of our student or alumni athletes, many whom have spoken tonight. Their achievements are exceptional and stand on their own merit. Indeed, these achievements are only tarnished by the mascot's connection to racism. Our outstanding athletes have proven their individual skill, their work ethic, and their commitment to teamwork. This would be true of them if they were called Wolverines, Raptors, or Rebels. Indeed, if professional athletes can play for different teams and perform equally well under different monikers, so can our Walpole students.
1 minute.
The problem of systemic racism is pervasive throughout our country in large and small ways. It will only end when we all repeatedly take action to address and end it when we see it. Sentiment I have shared this evening is not a new position for me. However, the present climate has renewed my urgency on this matter, and now you, our school committee leaders, have the opportunity to take action and once and for all put to rest the long divisive questions about our mascot's racist connections and our community's willingness to be part of the solution in ending systemic racism. Thank you.
Thank you. Hannah, you are up. And on deck is Erin Narlock.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Hannah.
Hi. It's nice to see all of your faces. I'm Hannah Meridian. I graduated in 2017. I want to begin by citing abolitionist and former slave Frederick Douglass. In 1862, Douglass said, quote, "Rebel and traitor are epithets too good for such common monsters of perfidy and ingratitude." Washington, Jefferson, John Jay, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Alexander Hamilton, and many other brave and good men have worn those appellations, and I hate to see them now worn by wretches, who instead of being rebels against slavery, are actually rebelling against the principles of human liberty and progress, for the whole black purpose of establishing slavery in its most odious form, end quote. From this point forward in American history, it is clear that the Confederacy hijacked the title rebel, and its meaning is now forever twisted, perverted, distorted. Later in our American history, the year 1965 proved to be a pivotal year for the civil rights movement. It was the year in which Revolutionary Malcolm X was shot, 3 marches from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama took place, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed. It was also the year in which a suburb of Boston purposefully decided to employ the heinous symbols of the American Civil War in their public schools, a reactionary decision from a white majority town. Furthermore, to acknowledge the need to rebrand a symbol, as the school committee decided to do in 2015, is to recognize its inherent fault. No matter how intensely Walpole intends to rebrand the rebel name, its racist legacy will always haunt us. Pride in a mascot cannot trump this reality. Before I conclude, I want to say that I spent some time sitting with many of you as the student representative to the school committee from the high school for 3 years. Vice Chairwoman Gallivan, on behalf of the school committee, you gifted me Profiles in Courage by John F. Kennedy. As you know, Kennedy highlights individuals who risked their political careers in standing by their most steadfast yet controversial beliefs. I hope that all of you will remember these leaders as you deliberate and think about what you challenged me to do and in turn challenged yourselves to do when you gave me that book 3 years ago. To conclude, I want to return to the same speech I referenced earlier from Frederick Douglass in 1862.
1 minute.
At the end of his speech, he stated, "The only road to national honor and permanent peace to us is to meet, fight, dislodge, drive back, conquer, and subdue the rebels." Unfortunately, over 150 years after Douglass's speech, we find ourselves on that same road to national honor, and particularly in our case, town honor. It is my opinion we must fight, dislodge, drive back, conquer, and subdue the legacy of the rebel name in our town, and that begins with changing it. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Hannah. Up next is Erin. And on deck is Molly Rockwood.
Hi, good
Hi, Erin.
evening. Hi. You can hear me?
Yes, you may begin.
All right. My name is Erin Narlock. I'm a mother of 2 children. I'm not from here. I'm originally from the Midwest, and I've lived and worked in the American South and in Europe. In the South, I was the founding curator and director of a museum that looked at unpacking the heritage that surrounded it. And in Germany, I completed an integration course with immigrants from over 24 countries from around the world. What I have come to understand through my personal and professional journey is we are called to be civically engaged individuals. And we're here to civically engaged individuals that aren't allowing the perpetuation of overt or covertly racist symbols or ideals to permeate our society. The merit of history is to be explored through critical thinking in classrooms and not to perpetuate the falsehood, hero worship that promotes idealism to the fissure rooted in our society. And really, I urge this to be changed for the future. I don't feel that it has any place. And quite honestly, when I moved to Boston and the area into Walpole, I was very surprised, and it immediately made a connection for me of racism, of the Confederacy, of everything that everyone has discussed this evening amongst colleagues. That's the first thing they mention. They continue to mention the coach that everyone talked about earlier this evening. So I just urge you to consider our children, their future, and where history can be unpacked through critical thought. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Next is Molly Rockwood, and on deck is Jennifer Driscoll.
Hi,
Hi,
can
Molly.
you hear me?
Yes, you may begin.
Hi, my name is Molly Rockwood. I graduated from Walpole High School, class of 2016. My dad is a Rockwood and my mom is a Betro, so my families are very much ingrained in the Walpole local community. With that being said, my dad, my uncle, and my brother all won Super Bowls under the Rebel name. But I just think right now it's time to change the name. The whole idea of Rebel Pride in Walpole is only relevant in Walpole. Anywhere you go outside of Walpole, it's, as you've heard from everyone else earlier in the night and probably on to later, the name Rebel, once you leave this town, a name that once filled you with so much pride now fills you with embarrassment. And we as a community, we're known as the friendly town. We pride ourselves in our sports, our academics, our arts. Our public schools is supposed to be one of the best in the state, yet how can we fill ourselves with pride when our name, our mascot, overshadows all these accomplishments because of this anti-Black sentiment? I just want to encourage you all to, again, please listen to the voices of the community. Please, especially those who are Black, who are people of color, please listen to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Next up is Jennifer Driscoll, and on deck, Amber Walsh.
Hello?
Hi, I can hear you, I can't see you, but if you want to turn on your video, if not, your name does match up, so you can speak.
Okay, I am
a Walpole alumni class of 2005, and Walpole High did a lot of great things for me. The film festival program introduced me to the career that I'm in now, which I'm really grateful for. But I honestly don't understand why we're still having this discussion and why we're wasting the school committee's time or anyone's time debating a mascot that is such a divisive issue and does not foster an environment of inclusion for so many people. And I've heard a lot of arguments from people that I've grown up with that have said that, rebel pride is attached to so many memories that are positive for them, and that is great, and those memories will not be touched, but those memories are in the past, and we need to create new memories moving forward and help future generations that will not have those kinds of bias or prejudice be ingrained in them. And keeping kids further apart from symbols of oppression helps us all in the long run. And I'm not going to use all of my time because I know a lot of people want to speak, but if we are taking suggestions for a new mascot, I would like to pose that the Walpole dog rock, the underdogs, become the symbol of Walpole. I think that's something that we all know, we all recognize, and we can all get behind. And if we want to argue about it, then we can argue about if it's a dog or if it's a panda. Thank you very much. I yield my time.
Thank you. Okay. Next up, we have Amber Walsh. And on deck, Alan Cameron. Hi, Amber. There you go.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Amber Walsh, and I would like to speak briefly to urge Walpole School Committee to change the rebel name. I am an alumnus of Walpole High School class of 2013, and I've also been a proud 5th grade teacher in Dorchester for the past 3 years. At this point, no one needs a history lesson to learn about the racist nature of the name Rebels. The 2 recent graduates of Walpole High School who initiated this petition and the 2 alumni speakers who presented at the Rally for Justice on the Common this past Saturday have done that for us, as well as many residents, alumni, and current students tonight. Walpole High School should be proud to have current students and alumni who use their voices to speak passionately and with the interest of positive social change in mind. I would like to further amplify those voices by saying that I hope that changing the Rebels name will only be step 1 for Walpole Public Schools. I hope that the next step will be taking a critical look at the K-12 curriculum and making sure that students are reading books by Black authors, learning about Black history, and anti-racism is being explicitly taught and practiced. It is imperative that schools who serve predominantly white students are engaging in this work if we are to advance to be a more equitable and just society. Walpole is full of amazing, compassionate, expert educators, many of whom inspired me to become a teacher myself. So I have no doubt that these conversations and actions are already happening. At the same time, as an educator at a school with mostly Black and brown students, it is a responsibility I take very seriously to speak up at this meeting and to urge the Walpole School Committee to continue to reflect on how you will educate your students to be agents of positive social change in the world. Lastly, I'm more than happy to be a resource or thought partner going forward. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing about Walpole's progress in the future.
Thank you, Amber. Sorry, next I have that was in the queue is Courtney Doherty, and then will be Alan Cameron. So Courtney, I will get you on now. Sorry about that. Hi, Courtney. We can see you, so you can just unmute.
Okay.
Hi, Courtney.
How
Fine. So when you're ready, you may begin.
Sorry, I did sign up that I wasn't going to speak, but I'm here, so I'll be happy to speak. Okay, so I did write something up. Just want to introduce myself. I want to say my name's Courtney Doherty. I was raised in Walpole, and I moved into town. I chose to raise my family here as well. While attending college in 2000, I was hired as the varsity cheerleading coach for Walpole High School. I was only 20 years old, so being so young, running a sports team was not easy. I tried really hard to teach my athletes to have school pride, to love the town they lived in, and respect the school they attended. One of the issues while coaching the cheerleading team was the former connection to the Confederate flag. I was very aware of this situation because I was a cheerleader at WHS in the mid-90s when we voted to get rid of the flag and to no longer allow the song Dixie to be played. I always made it a point to guide my athletes and to remind them that we did not associate with those anymore. I have attended sporting events for WHS for the last 20 years. I have not heard Dixie being sung in the stands or by the players for 20 years. My children are now 12, 10, and 7. They all play sports here in town, and they're very proud to be Rebels. My boys have never seen the Confederate flag to represent the Rebel name until now. If the Rebel name, for which it is now a symbol of racism, because students used to hold the Confederate flags and sing Dixie in the stands, I believe that we do need to give them a new way to display their Rebel pride. We do not currently have a mascot per se. We have a W. Some have swords. All different sports teams have different W's to represent their uniforms. I feel that it leaves a blank space with these students to have something to identify with. I think that we could move forward and give these students something positive, like a mascot. Like I saw someone on Facebook mention the Rebel Bulldogs. We keep the name Rebel, we add a mascot to it that has nothing to do with Confederacy. I guess it's another rebranding, but in a completely different way.
1 minute.
The uniforms can still say Rebels, but we have a bulldog mascot or anything, and the kids can identify with something else. I know it would save a lot of money. I know it's not about money. Everyone keeps saying it's not about money, but in reality, it costs a lot of money. I ran a program for 15 years, and I know what it takes to design, order, and pay for uniforms for one program. $200 a student. I know the football team just spent $50,000. So are these people going to stand behind us and give us money to pay for all these uniforms? Because I know I've been gone. They're still wearing the uniforms from 10 years ago because they simply don't have the money. School does not fund that.
10 seconds.
Okay. My kids will always be proud to live in this town no matter what their team name is. The stands will always be filled with proud parents, grandparents, and family members and friends. We'll still be one of the best athletic towns in the state, and we'll still have pride no matter what it says on our chests. That's all.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Alan Cameron.
Great. Hey everyone, good to see you all.
Hi.
Thank you for inviting me tonight, allowing me to get a chance to speak and for taking on this issue, and for all your hard work during this difficult time. I can't speak with the honesty and the power of the students and the former students and the teachers, the members of the community who spoke before me to advocate for the end of the use of the name Rebel by Walpole High School, but I will add my voice to theirs and implore you to make this important change for our community. Walpole has many kind and generous people who make this town great, including many of those who disagree with me on this issue. However, to anybody outside of Walpole, including people who moved to Walpole like me, the name Rebel is still associated with Confederacy, the cause that had the goal of destroying the United States to have a place where slavery, owning people, was legal. I know there have been efforts over the years to rebrand, and I'm proud that when I was on the committee with you, we covered up the Confederate caricature on the Welcome to Walpole sign with the W, and that's great work that's been done. But it hasn't been enough, as evidenced by the unsanctioned use of the battle flag by people unofficially. And that association creates a hostile environment. And that's not only unacceptable, it's a tragic dereliction of our duty to every student and member of our community. The name Rebel has been in place for too long, and it must not be tolerated anymore. And I had one more point. Eliminating the name Rebel is the final step in a long process to remove the Confederate association with the town. But it's only the beginning of our work as a community. We have to do a better job educating ourselves and teaching our children to listen, have empathy, identify prejudice, and fight discrimination. In sum, the feelings of those who are nostalgic for the Rebel glory days are vastly outweighed by the pain, embarrassment, and anger that the name causes for many other members of our community, including me. You have the opportunity and the obligation to change history for the better. Please seize it and end the use of the name Rebels at Walpole High School. It'll make our town proud. Thank you again for letting me come on, and have a great night.
Thank you. Mr. Hahn, are we down to the...
That is our final person.
Mr. Buckley, Mrs. Gallivan, that was our final person who registered to speak tonight.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Goff, and thank you for all those who have taken the time over the last 3 hours to give testimony to the school committee. I know I speak for my colleagues when I articulate our gratitude for the passion and power of the statements given today. Just a note on process, the committee will not speak this evening and deliberate on the name Rebels. We will take the next 48 hours to continue to read emails and comments. The ability to generate comments through our portal will continue. The ability for members of the community to email the committee will continue, and we will take this matter up at 7:30 on Thursday evening. Again, I'd like to just thank the community as a whole, those who respectfully listened in on television and on YouTube to this process, and all those people new to our community who have been here a very long time, students, who are parents, who registered their opinions. I know colleagues and I over the past 10 days have been carefully listening to the community and reading the continuing to do this for 48 hours, then deliberate and speak as a committee. Anything else? Mr. Breen? Mark, want to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
I'll beat you to it. Motion by Ms. Gale, second by Mr. Breen. Call the roll. Mr. Buckley, yes. Ms. Denitsky?
Yes.
Gallivan?
Yes.
Ms. Breen?
Yes.
Ms. Muccini?
Yes.
Ms. Cyrek? Yes. Ms. Gale,
Yes.
thank you very much. Have a good evening. See
Mr.
you on Thursday.
Oh, very good.